Dawson's Creek star James Van Der Beek died this week, less than 2 years after he announced he had colorectal cancer. He was only 48, and that type of cancer is becoming more deadly among people under 50. NPR's Yuki Noguchi is here to talk more about this. Good morning.
Good morning, Leila.
Yuki, what is happening with colorectal cancer, and how does it stack up against other cancers?
You could say colorectal cancer is bucking the trends with this disease. Overall, cancer survival is a great news story. 70% of people diagnosed with some form of cancer today live 5 or more years, which is a massive improvement over just a couple of decades, and that's largely thanks to better technology, to detect or target cancer for therapy. But then there's the baffling story of colorectal cancer, which is now the third most common cancer. It's less common than lung or breast, but it's now the biggest cancer killer for those under 50. And in fact, if you look at older people, colorectal cancer death rates are declining. Death rates from the most common cancers among young people are also declining again, except for colorectal cancer. And that's increasing at a very rapid rate of 1.1% every year for the past 2 decades, according to the American Cancer Society.
Why?
Yeah, that is a big question. Why are these rates increasing? There are theories that diet or environmental factors may be driving up these, new cancer death rates. But there are still no definitive answers as to why it's increasing.
In 2021, the recommended age for colonoscopy screenings went down from age 50 to 45. Has that helped catch more of these cancers?
It has. Colonoscopy recommendations were changed precisely because of this trend of seeing more advanced disease occurring in younger patients. And in fact, now, half of colorectal cancer cases in this age group are diagnosed between the ages of 45 and 49. So, colorectal cancers tend to grow slowly, so they're quite treatable if caught early, which makes detection so critical. But one of the problems among younger adults, and, this can be true of many cancers, is that they're less likely to suspect cancer and therefore more likely to ignore symptoms. And that's why it's often caught at a later stage for younger patients. The symptoms to watch for in this case are changes in bowel habits, abdominal pain, or rectal bleeding. I should also say, Leila, that, access to screening is a perennial issue. You consistently see racial disparities impact screening and survival rates.
So what are some of the strategies to improve detection early?
There can be strong genetic or hereditary drivers of cancers, especially, early onset cancers. So if you're at a higher risk because of family history, getting screened earlier than age 45 is probably a good idea. And also, cancer is a complex disease, and lifestyle, especially not smoking or drinking alcohol or getting lots of good diet and exercise, are both preventative and good for recovery.
NPR health correspondent Yuki Noguchi, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you.
Globalization mandates, of course, from the most powerful white people, these blackouts. You have a totally energy independent state like Texas, plenty of natural gas, oil, gasoline, coal. They were forced to keep up with the mandates and convert up to 20% of their power grid to green energy by 2021. Green energy being wind, solar, hydro, battery, etc. So that 20% freezes over. And the 80% that's left, that always has worked, the oil, the coal, the gas, is not enough to supply the rest of the state. So they have to cut off certain parts of the grid to keep it working. And this is what's going to happen in 2025 when that green energy is mandated to be 50% of the grid. What happens when we have a snowstorm then? And what happens in Chicago and New York? Where it's cold most of the year here. So it's big. This green energy thing that they've been pushing through this Green New Deal, and 5 years ago this wanted to happen in Texas, but they were forced to take fully, perfectly functioning parts of their grid and convert it to these green energy, and now that green energy freezes over and the rest of the grid is all vulnerable.
It has been 5 years since Texas suffered massive power blackouts caused by a winter storm. The state has worked to strengthen its energy grid since then, as it's also trying to meet growing demand for energy and aging infrastructure. Houston Public Media's Natalie Weber reports.
Millions of Texans were left without power during the storm as the state's power grid struggled under freezing conditions. At least 246 people died, and the storm is estimated to have caused hundreds of billions of dollars in damages to the Texas economy. Houston resident Sade Hogue was 5 months pregnant when her home lost power. Hogue and her family went to stay with relatives who still had electricity. Then, a few days later, they also lost power.
Not only are you worried about you, but you're worried about the unborn child because you don't know what the effects of this freeze is doing to the child as well.
Texas is unique in that it operates an isolated power grid. Only pockets of the state are connected to other parts of the U.S.'s eastern and western grids. Several of the state's power plants started to fail on February 13th, as they were not designed to withstand extreme winter weather. Grid operators were forced to initiate rolling blackouts. In the 5 years since then, the state has taken steps to harden its power grid.
Texas has a lot more protection built into the system than we did a few years ago.
That's Matt Baums with the Texas Advanced Energy Business Alliance, a coalition of energy companies. He says the state has implemented stringent standards to ensure power plants can withstand winter weather. Texas added more batteries to help increase energy supply when demand peaks. Baums says all of these factors helped the state's power grid remain stable throughout a winter storm last month.
I would say it wasn't one silver bullet, but it was really those layers of reliability.
Will McAdams previously served on the state's Public Utility Commission, which implemented fines of up to $1 million per day per violation of the new power plant standards.
Those are significant penalties that are consistent with federal penalty structures in other regulated areas.
Still, the state is grappling with aging infrastructure and growing energy demand. Energy consultant Beth Garza says the state's new winterization standards are a work in progress.
It has to get cold for you to understand where the vulnerabilities are. So that, in some respects, is an ongoing practice and process.
For many Texans, memories of the 2021 freeze still linger.
You're always in fear. You don't know, if you're going to be okay, if your family's going to be okay. So you want to make sure everything is safe and you try to over-prepare.
As the state says it's better equipped to face winter storms, Texans want to make sure they're prepared too. That's what Sade Hogue did last month. Before the January freeze, she stocked up on tuna, bread, and extra bottled water. For NPR News, I'm Natalie Weber in Houston.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
The Environmental Protection Agency has repealed its own landmark Obama-era assessment that greenhouse gases threaten public health and welfare. Public health and environmental groups warn today's changes could lead to many more premature deaths and a rise in asthma attacks in the coming decades. Until today's shift, which is expected to be challenged in court, the so-called endangerment finding has been the legal foundation for many of the federal government's climate regulations. William Brangham has more, and it's part of our ongoing series, Tipping Point.
The EPA first made that assessment in 2009 after an exhaustive review of the scientific evidence, which showed that greenhouse gases were dangerously warming the planet and exacerbating extreme weather events and air pollution. Under the Clean Air Act, that meant the EPA was then obligated to regulate that pollution. But today, President Trump called that finding a scam that had no legal or scientific basis. His EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, called it the single largest act of deregulation in American history.
The 2009 Obama EPA endangerment finding is now eliminated. This action will save American taxpayers over $1.3 trillion. What that means is lower prices, more choices, and an end of heavy-handed climate policies.
Environmental advocates warned that this would worsen public health and deal a major blow to any attempts by the U.S. to lessen the impacts of climate change. For more on today's announcement, we are joined now by Maxine Joselo. She's a climate reporter for the New York Times. Maxine, thank you so much for being here. This original finding came out of a Supreme Court ruling, Massachusetts versus the EPA, which said, yes, you can consider carbon pollution a pollutant, but you have to prove that it's detrimental to human health, which the Obama administration did. Since that time, how has the endangerment finding been used by the federal government?
That's exactly right. And the endangerment finding did not, in and of itself, set any new climate regulations, but it formed the legal and scientific basis for those regulations. And in particular, the Obama EPA used it as the justification to set the first limits ever on greenhouse gas emissions from cars, trucks, and eventually from power plants that burn coal or natural gas to make electricity. And in the intervening years, there's been a back and forth between Democratic, Republican administrations, a weakening and a strengthening of those rules, but they've remained in effect and as that litigation has played out.
So now with that endangerment finding gone, what happens now?
So today, EPA said that not only were they repealing the endangerment finding, but they also said they were immediately repealing all greenhouse gas limits on cars and trucks. So that's already happened. And then in the coming months, EPA said it plans to repeal additional limits on greenhouse gases from power plants and other sources as well.
The science that undergirded that first finding has not changed. In fact, the National Academies last year said not only is the science of that original finding accurate, but it's in subsequent years become more evident. How does the administration justify this current move?
So Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, said that the Obama administration in 2009, when it issued the endangerment finding, used more dire predictions of how much the planet would warm than it actually would. And in some ways, that is true. In 2009, the Obama administration cited some extreme projections of warming that are no longer as likely to happen because the world has taken some climate action, some efforts to reduce emissions and improve the deployment of renewable energy. That being said, the science was unequivocal in 2009 that greenhouse gases were causing climate change, and that was unleashing more frequent and severe heat waves, floods, other extreme weather events. And in the past 16 years, the science has only grown more unequivocal, not less.
The Zeldin also said that this was about saving money. I mean, we know that the White House is concerned, that voters are concerned about energy prices right now. But he and the president both said that this would really make prices for things cheaper, specifically like cars getting $3,000 cheaper. Does your reporting show that there's evidence for that? Have these regulations cost Americans, and will getting rid of them make things cheaper?
Great question. Affordability is obviously a big concern for voters and a big topic for both political parties right now. And we saw Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, in the briefing this week also claim that this action would save about $2,400 off the cost of a new car for the average consumer. And Lee Zeldin and President Trump both repeated that figure today. The experts that I talked to, though, I had them go back and review the EPA's proposed rule and the math and the calculations that the agency did in that proposal. And they said that the agency relied on some false and misleading assumptions to reach that $2,400 figure. So one thing that they assumed was that gas prices would be lower in the future, but they didn't explain why they thought that. And they also didn't account for really rapidly declining costs of batteries used in electric vehicles. And those are just two examples. The experts I talked to went on and on. And they also said that it's not just about the total cost of ownership of a new vehicle. It's also about the fuel cost, and more efficient vehicles save you money on gas because you're filling up less often.
Right, over the long run. This move comes as the evidence of a warming planet just grows. 2025 was, I think, the third hottest year on record. surpassed only by 2024 and 2023. What do environmental advocates say will be the likely result of this move?
They say this is going to essentially take the U.S. out of the fight to combat climate change at a time when, as you said, the impacts are only growing more clear, from the wildfires in Los Angeles last year to the flooding in Texas that claimed dozens of lives. Those climate disasters are going to continue and accelerate, and the U.S. government will no longer be playing any role in attempting to contain that.
You and your colleague Lisa Friedman had a story recently indicating that the Trump administration wants this to get to the Supreme Court. Why is that?
The Trump administration is moving very quickly with this repeal of the endangerment finding. They did it in just about a year, which may not feel fast to you and me, but in the world of slow-moving regulations, that's very fast. And they're doing that because they want to have this litigated in federal court and then at the Supreme Court while Trump is still in office. And that's important because then his lawyers at the Justice Department can defend this before the Supreme Court if, say, a future Democratic president were to take office when this got to the court, then that Justice Department probably wouldn't defend this rule.
I see. Maxine Joselo of the New York Times, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
But still, we are victims of word games. Semantics is always a bitch. Places once called underdeveloped and backwards, they now call them mineral rich.
Now, the United States is stepping up its push to break China's monopoly on African minerals. This week in Cape Town at the Indaba Mining Conference, Washington is pushing a strategy built on contracts and capital. According to reports ahead of the conference, the U.S. is using off-take deals and state-backed funding to compete with China across Africa's mineral belt. In simple terms, Washington is paying upfront to claim future supply without having any presence on the ground. Reports say 3 countries are now on the U.S.'s radar: Zambia, Guinea, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC sits at the center of this fight. It supplies more than 70% of the world's cobalt, and that makes the DRC the choke point for cobalt, and China are already in control of much of that choke point. But the U.S. is trying to change where the supply from those mines ends up through financial leverage, and that includes upfront financing, buyers locked in before production, contracts that redirect minerals into U.S.-aligned supply chains, all without taking on the political and operational risks of running mines in the Congo. Now, that approach is no longer just in theory, as it is already playing out in the DRC. According to industry reports, the Congo's state-owned miner, Gemanes, has planned to sell around 100,000 tons of copper to U.S. buyers this year. For more than a decade, most of the Congolese copper and cobalt has flown straight to China for refining. And for the first time, that supply route is being challenged. Washington is now backing this mineral push with new trade rules. Last week, the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has announced plans for a new trade grouping that is focused on critical minerals. The goal is to use price floors and tariffs to stop subsidized minerals from flooding the market. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says that 55 countries have joined the talks, including the Democratic Republic of Congo. U.S. officials say that the aim is simple: make mining and processing outside China economically viable again.
I think there's a growing global recognition that we need to have supply chains for critical minerals that are reliable and diverse across the world. Some countries have a number of critical minerals that they have available to them in terms of mining, but just haven't been able to do it because a foreign competitor will come in, they'll gut the price, they'll undercut it through state subsidies and unfair practices, and so it becomes economically unviable to be able to explore for critical minerals.
However, China is pushing back to these new rules. Speaking in Beijing, the Foreign Ministry warned against what it called trade rules written by small groups of countries. The comments came just days after Washington unveiled its new minerals bloc.
Maintaining an open, inclusive, and mutually beneficial international trade environment is in the common interest of all countries, and all parties have a responsibility to play a constructive role in safeguarding the stability and security of the global supply chain for critical minerals. At the same time, we oppose any country using small circle rules to undermine the international economic and trade order.
For now, China still holds the upper hand. Chinese firms own many of Congo's largest copper and cobalt assets. Most of the minerals are processed inside China. Chinese firms also control key transport routes, moving minerals out of Congo. But this U.S. minerals push comes with a contradiction. Zambia, Guinea, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are now facing tighter U.S. travel restrictions and added visa requirements. The same countries Washington is courting for critical minerals are facing tougher barriers for their citizens entering the United States. The U.S. has not publicly linked the two policies, but the overlap is hard to ignore. As the Indaba continues, both sides are pressing for deals. For now, China controls the ground. The U.S. is trying to buy access. The question is, can new U.S. contracts break decades of Chinese control on Africa's minerals?
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But, you know, when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
Donald Trump often breaks big news on his Truth Social platform. He's constantly posting announcements, threats, trade wars, campaign messages, meant to create maximum publicity. And just as often, his posts draw anger and backlash. Well, late last week, a video that included racist imagery of former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama was shared on Truth Social. They were shown as apes. Well, the post remained online for 12 hours. Plenty of time to be seen and shared. So by the time it was deleted, screenshots were everywhere. The storm had already started. And when asked about it, Trump showed no regrets. He refused to apologize and said he did not make a mistake.
Mr. President, a number of Republicans are calling on you to apologize for that post. Is that something you're going to do?
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things. I looked at the beginning of it, it was fine. And they had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered, if you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff from The Lion King. And certainly it was a very strong post in terms of voter fraud. Nobody knew that that was at the end. If they would have looked, they would have seen it. And probably they would have had the sense to take it down.
The video included claims of election fraud, attacks on Democrats, and conspiracies about the 2020 U.S. vote. Then, near the end, came a brief clip where Barack and Michelle Obama's faces were altered and superimposed onto bodies of monkeys. By Friday night, the backlash was impossible to ignore. Speaking to reporters aboard the Air Force One, Trump said he had not seen the offensive part of the clip. He said he only watched the opening section, the part that focused on election fraud. He also accused staff members of making the error and claimed they also didn't watch the entire video before it was made public.
Mr. President, the media post that you took down earlier today, the White House says that a staffer sent it. Who sent it, and are you going to fire them?
No, I looked at it, I saw it, and I just looked at the first part. It was about voter fraud in someplace, Georgia. There was a lot of voter fraud, 2020 voter fraud, and I didn't see the whole thing. I guess during the end of it, there was some kind of a picture that people don't like. I wouldn't like it either, but I didn't see it. I looked at the first part, and it was really about voter fraud in and the machines, how crooked it is, how disgusting it is. Then I gave it to the people. Generally, they look at the whole thing, but I guess somebody didn't. And they posted, and we took it down, and we did it. You know, but that was a voter fraud that nobody talks about. They don't like to talk about that post. We took it down as soon as we found out about it.
Inside the White House, the response shifted over time. At first, officials brushed aside the criticism. The press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, called the outrage fake. She described the video as a meme, one that portrays Trump as the king of the entire jungle and Democrats as cartoon characters. But that explanation didn't last for long. Trump faced major bipartisan resistance. Democrats condemned the imagery and pointed to the Obamas' place in history, the first black president and First Lady of the United States. Former Vice President Kamala Harris accused the White House of backpedaling. What stood out was the response from within Trump's own party. Senator Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the Senate, called the video blatantly racist. He said it was the most offensive thing he has seen come from the White House. Another Republican senator, Roger Wicker, also broke ranks, saying the post was unacceptable. He said the president should apologize. Civil rights groups say the image reinforces prejudice.
This racist image that we saw that came from the president's social media account is just another reminder of how much work needs to be done to combat centuries-old racist images and stereotypes about black people, and how we have to continue to affirm our dignity, our humanity, and also celebrating our accomplishments.
There's been no comment from Barack or Michelle Obama. They've maintained their dignity. In the past, Trump has questioned Obama's citizenship and championed the birther conspiracy, where he asserted that some of his political rivals were not born in the U.S. More recently, he has been using AI-generated images for political messaging. Several of those have also sparked a backlash. Well, the post might have lasted just hours, but its impact may last a lot longer, as Americans question the ethics of Trump's media machine and where the public and the administration believe the lines should be drawn.
Okay, number 6, I think we should deal with Vietnam straight up and just say that we want all black men exempt from military service. That's right. We want all black men exempt from military service, because you can't have a black man going over there to fight the yellow man for the white man when the white man stole his land from the red man. Okay, that makes a nice rhyme, but no political sense whatsoever.
Often overlooked in the history of World War II are the 27 Tuskegee Airmen who disappeared in combat over Europe. Jeff Bennett recently sat down with Cheryl W. Thompson. Her father was also an airman, and she chronicles the lives of those missing men and the racism they endured while serving their country in her new book, Forgotten Souls, The Search for the Lost Tuskegee Airmen.
Cheryl Thompson, welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you for having me.
This book centers on 27 Tuskegee Airmen who vanished during World War II. Why have their disappearances remained unresolved for nearly 8 decades now?
You know, Jeff, I think there's a lot of reasons why, but I think they just were forgotten, right? The war ended in 45, people went on with their lives, and it wasn't really until like 2011 when a research analyst, it was his job to sort of find the missing World War II veterans, and he decided to focus on the 27 missing airmen. But I just think they were forgotten, right? There were so many people who disappeared in that war and others that I think they just were forgotten.
And the families, as you point out in the book, left with no remains, no answers, no official acknowledgement. How did that official silence really compound the sense of loss they felt?
Well, you know, it's funny because when I first reached out to the families, and there was the first one I reached out to, my standard line was always, hey, my dad was an airman, like I'm researching this book, and I want to know, like, when was the last time you heard from the government? And they were so happy that somebody cared enough to reach out to them, that they've never forgotten, right? They just kind of suffered in silence, if you will, for all of these almost 80 years. And I think that now that somebody has said, hey, you know, we really care about this, like, tell us your story, now it's brought all of this stuff up, and they're still hoping that somebody will, you know, try and find these men.
Yeah. You mentioned your father. His presence runs quietly but powerfully throughout this book. At what point did this stop becoming just a reporting exercise and become something really personal for you?
Well, you know, I always say that I wish I had paid more attention growing up to the stories that he used to tell. But it was when I first decided to do the book, I thought, I wonder what he would think. But, you know, being the reporter, I always sort of like kept that reporting hat on. But yeah, there were times when I thought, oh my God, this is like, what would my dad think about this? What would his reaction be? When I reached out to the airmen who were still surviving at the time when I was doing the research, I wondered, like, did he know them? What was their relationship? And so I think it was always in my mind somewhere, like the reporter/daughter thing, and wondered, like, would he be proud? Would he be happy about this? Would he think I was going too far by asking certain questions?
Did you ever answer that question for yourself about what he ultimately thought or would think?
I like to think that he would be happy. That because he knew these, you know, some of these men. He was over in Italy with a lot of these men. And so, you know, I wish I knew which ones he knew. I know from my research that he was in the cadet class with some of them. The guy who's on the cover of the book, he knew him. They were in the same cadet class. And I just thought, you know, I think he would be pleased to know that they weren't forgotten.
You document that one pilot's remains were recovered, but it was only after a researcher followed a hunch. And this is in 2018. What does that suggest about what still might be possible?
Well, you know, technology has changed so much. Everything has changed so much since the 1940s, you know, 80 years. I mean, because a lot of these guys went, you know, some of them went down in the Mediterranean and, you know, it goes deep, you know, thousands of feet deep. And there are remains out there, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. My hope is that somebody will pick up the torch.
Let's talk more about the airmen, because what so often gets lost about them is that they had to be flawless simply to be allowed to exist. They had to be perfect in every way. What did perfection cost them, though, emotionally and psychologically?
You know, what I always say about these men is, and I say it in the book, they were resilient. They were treated badly because of the era. You know, it's a Jim Crow South, and they weren't wanted. And they weren't wanted in Uncle Sam's army. They certainly were not wanted as the first black military pilots. And so they had to sort of put that aside, even though you knew it stayed with them. The airmen I talked to when I started this book, there were 7 of them who had flown over in Europe and 7 of them who were still alive. And I talked to 5 of the 7, and now they're all gone. The last one died last year, but it still haunted them. I mean, the way they were treated, they never forgot it. But they knew that they had to rise above it because their goal was really to serve this country. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be pilots. They wanted to fly. They didn't want the politics of all of this. And that came along with it, unfortunately. But they persevered. And they did amazing things. And they were still proud of it till the day they died, of what they accomplished.
What does the federal government owe these men and owe their families, not just symbolically, but materially?
I think that the families I talked to would be happy if somebody just reached out to them to say, hey, we haven't forgotten your dad, we haven't forgotten your brother, we haven't forgotten your uncle, but they have heard nothing from the government, according to them, in decades. And so many of these families, the spouses and the parents, they're gone. They died without getting any closure. And I think at this point, the families just want to know that somebody still cares.
The book is Forgotten Souls, The Search for the Lost Tuskegee Airmen. Cheryl W. Thompson, it's a great pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Funding for the Department of Homeland Security expires at the end of the day.
The Senate failed on Thursday to advance a spending bill that would have funded DHS through the end of September. Democrats have vowed not to support any bill without major changes to immigration enforcement. Here's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Today's strong vote was a shot across the bow to Republicans. Democrats will not support a blank check for chaos.
In a moment, we speak with Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego. First, the facts.
NPR congressional correspondent Barbara Sprunt joins us to talk through all this. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
So is this one of those days where the clock is ticking down to a shutdown and then there's a last-minute deal?
You know, I don't think so this time. Both sides seem pretty far apart still. Some Democratic demands do have bipartisan support, like requiring body cameras for officers. But there are other proposals that Republicans have pushed back on, like having officers remove their masks. So I think it's going to be a holding pattern while both parties keep negotiating.
Okay, so a shutdown, though, doesn't mean there won't be money for ICE, right?
That's right. A shutdown here does not mean a shutdown of ICE. And that's because the agency got over $70 billion in separate funds from Congress over the summer as part of Republicans' massive spending and tax bill. So other agencies within the DHS will be affected by a shutdown like TSA and FEMA.
Now, we saw top officials from ICE and Customs and Border Protection testifying before the Senate yesterday. But Kristi Noem, the head of DHS, wasn't there, right?
That's right, and her absence was mentioned a few times. Several senators said they want her to testify before the Homeland Security Committee. She's actually set to testify before a different committee come March. And you might remember that almost immediately after officers shot and killed Alex Preddy, Noem described him as a domestic terrorist. And she later said that she got that information from Border Patrol agents on the ground. But yesterday, CBP Commissioner Rodney Scott told the committee he never described Preddy as a terrorist, nor was he aware of anyone in his agency saying that. And he said he couldn't speculate as to why she would say that.
Interesting. So he's directly contradicting what Noem said. What else stood out to you in the hearing?
Well, we learned some important numbers. ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons said that there's been more than 36 internal investigations into allegations of excessive use of force by its agents in the last year. 18 have been closed, 19 pending, and 1 referred for further action, although he didn't say which incident that was. And another thing that stood out to me, senators spent a lot of time trying to clarify the use of force policies, how officers are trained in de-escalation. And Committee Chairman Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, played a video of Preddy and officers, and he paused the video several times, stopping to show officers pushing a nearby woman to the ground, spraying Preddy in the face, surrounding him.
I see nothing here, not even a hint of something that was aggressive on his part. Everything was retreat. He's over in the street, he retreats. The woman is pushed to the ground. He tries to assist the woman to get up. He's violently sprayed, and it just continues.
Now, the officials in response wouldn't give specifics about this. They said it's an ongoing investigation. They said the body camera footage would eventually be released. But Paul made a point of saying that ICE and CBP have to admit their mistakes in order to restore the public's trust.
That's NPR's Barbara Sprunt. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Maitia Yang is board president of the Hmong Cultural and Community Center in La Crosse. During a recent visit with her mother-in-law, Yang discovered the 80-year-old hadn't left her home in nearly 2 weeks.
She said, well, I'm scared to go out because what if I get picked up by ICE? I don't know the language, or I don't know what they're asking me.
Yang says most Hmong elders in La Crosse are U.S. citizens, but many struggle with English, making a confrontation with ICE feel like a big risk. It's why her organization held a community care rice drive to provide care packages to more than 230 older adults. In just weeks, the drive received more than $10,000 in donations from local businesses and community members. Yang says they hope to provide another round of care packages next month. Hope Kerwin, Wisconsin Public Radio.
Billie Holiday, I sing your blues. Bet your life against me and I swear to God you'll lose it. Motherfuck the cops, we still singing for St. Louis. Motherfuck the cops, we still singing for St. Louis. Motherfuck the cops, we still singing for St. Louis.
We're hearing from the family of the woman who died while being detained at the City Justice Center. Police tell us they found 32-year-old Dametria McDile dead inside her cell yesterday evening. Thanks for joining us on the 5 on Your Side app. I'm Mike Bush. Our Reagan DeTrolio reports on this ongoing investigation and what her family is now saying.
Here at the city's Justice Center is where McDile died Saturday evening inside her cell. And on Sunday, as you can see, her family waits outside of the steps of the Justice Center wanting answers.
She did not deserve to be ignored.
and they ignored her. They treated her bad.
Marilyn Jones is drenched in tears over the death of her 32-year-old sister, Dametria McDile.
She was a loving, caring sister.
Investigators say McDile was found unresponsive around 5 p.m. Saturday. McDile was then taken to the hospital where she died. The cause still unclear. Her family says she should have never been behind bars in the first place.
She did have mental issues. They definitely kept my sister in here, knowing that she had a mental state, and they could have transferred her to a mental facility. But instead, they just kept her here.
Community advocate Precious Jones stood by the family's side on Sunday.
I feel like nobody has reached out to this family. They've been basically antagonizing them since last night. They told them that they would have to wait till Monday to even know anything. And that's not better. That's not a better administration. That tells us that you all are going to try to cover up what happened.
5 on Your Side did reach out to Mayor Kara Spencer's office for a response. She sent a statement saying, quote, "My office and I extend condolences to her friends, family, and loved ones. We share the community's concerns over the lives lost in the city's care at the City Justice Center, and we support a detailed investigation into Dametria's death. We expect full cooperation from our departments and staff in that review." SLMPD's Force Investigations Unit is conducting a full investigation. Meanwhile, McDile leaves behind 6 children, all under the age of 14. Her sister Marilyn is asking for all the support she can get.
Help me bury her next to my mama. That's where she needs to be.
Reporting in St. Louis, I'm Regan DeTrolio, 5 on Your Side.
According to court records, McDile has been detained before on other charges. Her family started a fundraiser so they can hold a funeral and take care of her children.
I want to be a cop. I want to be a cop. Yeah. I want to be a cop.
Jeremy, the city of Seattle just settled the wrongful death lawsuit for John V. Candela. This comes more than 3 years after the 23-year-old was hit and killed by a Seattle police officer in a crosswalk. Couples Jackie Kent live this evening in South Lake Union with new details from the family's attorney. Jackie?
And the family, through their attorney, say John V. was cherished beyond measure and was even working toward a career in tech. They want her memory to be treated with respect and dignity, and they believe this settlement is a big part of that.
It's been 3 years since a crash took the life of 23-year-old John V. Candela in South Lake Union. We sat down with trial attorney Vonda Sargent, who just reached a settlement in the Candela family's wrongful death lawsuit with the city of Seattle.
There's a sense of relief. There's a sense of we can now move on. There was absolutely no reason that John V. should have been struck down.
Investigators said a now former Seattle officer was speeding well over the limit when he hit the college student in the crosswalk at Dexter and Thomas Street. Officer Kevin Dave was later fired for multiple policy violations after an investigation by the Office of Police Accountability.
This collision was preventable. Kevin Dave was on his way to an overdose call, and the person had called in the overdose was on the phone and reported, "I'm standing outside. This is my name." Refused to give other information like his apartment location, but he was standing outside and he was talking.
Sargent says John V.'s family living in India and Texas are grateful this chapter is resolved, noting the city's payout of $29,011,000. The number is symbolic after dash camera video exposed a conversation about the crash by another now fired Seattle officer, Daniel Otterer.
Yeah, just write a check. $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value.
She was struck down in her prime. She was actually leaving work from her school. So she did have value. She had value to her family, she had value to the community, and she's going to have value to the world on a much larger scale.
Sargent adds that while no amount can bring back John V., she believes the settlement sends a powerful message.
I think SPD and the city both have taken accountability.
And City Attorney Erica Evans, in a statement, called the death heartbreaking, and she said she hopes that this settlement helps to give the family some closure. I posted the full statement at comonews.com. For now, live in South Lake Union, Jackie Kent, Como News.
Jackie, thank you.
Let's talk more about the airmen, because what so often gets lost about them is that they had to be flawless simply to be allowed to exist. They had to be perfect in every way. What did perfection cost them, though, emotionally and psychologically?
You know, what I always say about these men is, and I say it in the book, they were resilient. They were treated badly.
We're digging into a once trusted Cook County judge. She was supposed to be helping an elderly man manage his money. Instead, she was taking large amounts for herself. That man was a Tuskegee Airman who fought for his country while battling segregation. Then, this.
Well, I've known Lawton since I was a baby. He's my grandfather's best friend. He's a Tuskegee Airman, World War II veteran, just an all-around wonderful person.
That's Lawton Wilkerson making history as one of America's first black military pilots. Tuskegee Airmen took frontline risks and then took heat as boundary breakers that many didn't like.
Dealing with segregation, dealing with all of that while still also flying. It is amazing.
After the military, he flew for fun, became a Chicago-based radio technician. He married, never had kids, and saved for his golden years.
It was clear Lawton should have had hundreds of thousands of dollars, certainly enough to take care of him for the rest of his life, because he'd worked so hard and saved so hard.
To tell the truth, I was doing that because I wanted to fly.
But at age 94, for a man who spent a lifetime trying to avoid it,
I came here.
Turbulence arrived.
Patricia Martin was seen as another kind of adopted family member, seen as someone who was trustworthy, who he cared about, who cared about him.
When I first became the presiding judge of
Martin, a relative through marriage, was viewed as the best person to oversee his finances. He had plenty to ride out his final years at this Southside retirement home.
Every box for trustworthiness seemed to be checked there, and so she seemed like the perfect person.
A lawyer turned judge who spent 24 years on the bench, rising to the top judge in Cook County's juvenile court.
She'd been appointed to a nationwide commission by President Obama dealing with vulnerable children. She seemed like the perfect person on paper. In hindsight, she was not.
In August 2020, word came from the nursing home
that account balances weren't right, checks were being dishonored.
The facility hadn't been paid in months. Lawton was $41,000 behind.
We started by contacting Patricia Martin. She attempted to dodge and evade, and she didn't seem to have the time to return a phone call over such an important thing.
Critical for Wilkerson, with his money now missing, he was told he was going to have to move out of the place he called home if things didn't get settled.
She stole the money, we can see from some of the documents.
11 withdrawals over 18 months, pocketing more than $245,000, shutting down accounts without telling anyone, moving most of her new wealth into harder-to-track Bitcoin.
It's hard to think of something more evil for her to have done, but she did.
Her final withdrawal came just 7 days before the barrier-breaking Wilkerson died.
All of her actions, they shock the conscience, and you'd think that if she was innocent, that would have caused her to want to communicate right away, but she didn't.
She didn't communicate with them and later ignored the judge overseeing the lawsuit. Martin repeatedly failed to show up for court hearings, the judge ordering her to halt all transactions. But court documents show she ignored that too, continuing to move money.
It makes me wonder what is wrong in Patricia's heart that she would do that to somebody.
In the end, the judge ordered Martin to pay triple what she took, $1.1 million for the $250,000 she stole.
It was a very nice feeling to see judgment enter, to see the court system taking it seriously, to see that despite the fact that Patricia had been a judge herself, that she's not above the law.
But she knows the law and used it to get that $1 million judgment thrown out, in part because Wilkerson had died.
She tried to drag it out, I believe hoping that my grandfather and other people would pass away before justice could be served.
Martin lost her law license as a result of all this, admitting the evidence would clearly and convincingly establish the facts and conclusions of misconduct. Misconduct we asked her about back in 2023. Judge Martin, is there anything you'd like to say to the Wilkerson family about what's been going on?
We can speak to my attorney.
In the months that followed, this became a criminal case, too. Martin charged with money laundering and financial exploitation of an elderly person. Late last year, that case quietly ended as she pled guilty to one felony theft count, sentenced to 4 years of probation.
Probation and a felony conviction for that sort of theft from that sort of a victim just is not quite enough.
In the end, his care never suffered. But for a man whose legacy is etched in history, the moves and manipulation of Patricia Martin is etched in the minds of those that loved Lawton most.
Lawton was such a fine man, one of the finest people I have ever met in my life. And Patricia Martin is one of the absolute worst humans. And to see that contrast between them is breathtaking.
Patricia Martin declined to speak with us for this story. Lawton Wilkerson's loved ones are planning to file another lawsuit, continuing their fight to get back the money Martin took. All this as the disgraced and disbarred former judge continues to draw her government pension.
If I'm a slave, call me a slave. Don't tell me that I'm a free person and I'm still a slave. Yeah, that really lulls me to sleep. You're not really a slave, you know. You're a co-worker. You know, you're a member of the firm, you know. This is the Bodie plantation, you know. And you are one of our business associates. Now, get that plow moving. Boy, I'm really working out now. I mean, boy, the sweat is flying, whatnot, and I'm behind that mule and I'm grinning. I'm a business associate at the Bodie plantation. Man, I feel great. Get up, mule.
So you, as long as the system of white supremacy exists, you don't see
Word
anything.
masters. See what I mean?
Choppers up over a large rally to restore the slavery exhibit at Independence National Park. It started a little over an hour ago. Now, the displays were removed by the National Park Service last month following an executive order by President Trump. The city of Philadelphia filed a lawsuit seeking to have the exhibit restored, and numerous groups are backing that lawsuit.
Well, reporter Liz Crawford has been covering this for us, and she is joining us now live from that rally. Liz.
Well, good evening, guys. One of the groups backing the city's lawsuit is Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, and that is the group that organized and put on this rally here today. It's actually just wrapping up now, but we had about 200 people here spilling out into Market Street a short time ago, many of them holding signs that say, "Restore the truth and don't erase history." Now, the president's house here at 6th and Market Streets was once the home of former Presidents George Washington and John Adams. The slavery exhibits detailed the lives of 9 people enslaved at the home while Washington lived here as president. Now, on January 22nd, the Park Service removed the displays following an executive order by President Trump. 34 panels are now being kept in storage by the Park Service. Now, again, there were at least 200 people here earlier, all of them with the same message to restore the exhibit. There were several speakers at the podium, including many elected officials.
When I first saw video of plaques that black leaders, activists, intellectuals, and historians had struggled to bring to light over many years, it had been a source of great pride to me to represent this district and to represent this land. We're 9 enslaved people, enslaved by the first president of the United States, labored here. They labored in conditions of extreme unfreedom, of captivity, and yet built a history.
Now, shortly after the exhibit was dismantled last month, the Park Service told CBS News Philadelphia it was following an executive order by President Trump to review interpretive content to ensure parks tell the full and accurate story of American history. And just new today, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties are all filing a brief and joining the city of Philadelphia in their lawsuit against the federal government. In Old City, Liz Crawford, CBS News, Philadelphia.
I'm getting in the elevator, and these 2 high school white boys tried to get on with me. And I just dove off. I said, y'all ain't killing me. I am scared of young white boys. If you white and under 21, I am running for the hill. What the hell is wrong with these white kids shooting up the school?
So as the community of Tumbler Ridge grieves, the RCMP have identified 18-year-old Jessie Van Rootselaar as the shooter involved, and we're beginning to learn more details about her. So for that, let's bring in the CBC's Stephanie Skandaris, who joins us now here in studio. Tell us a little bit more about what police have confirmed about the shooter.
Okay, so as you were saying, 18-year-old Jessie Van Rootselaar. The shooter, police say, lived 2 kilometers from the school in a home on Fellers Avenue. Now, that is where police found the bodies of her mother and 11-year-old stepbrother on Tuesday afternoon. Van Rootselaar dropped out of school 4 years ago, but still went to Tumbler Ridge Secondary for this shooting. And police say started shooting at random. 2 firearms, a long gun, and a modified handgun being used to shoot at students, educators, then at first responders before the shooter took her own life. Now, police say Van Rootselaar was assigned male at birth, but began transitioning about 6 years ago. And investigators are now looking at her digital footprint, her medical history, criminal records, to see if there is any clue as to a motive.
Now, we do know also what we've learned from police as they held that briefing yesterday is that the shooter had a history with authorities, and that was in terms of mental health and weapons concerns as well, saying that they had responded to this home and in calls regarding this particular individual. In fact, what more do we know about that?
That's right. So they are confirming they have been to the family home specifically on mental health related calls received as recently as last year. We did see some of the mother, her Facebook account, and that linked to some YouTube videos of Van Rootselaar. Now, this has since been taken down, but they appear to show an interest in hunting and weapons. Police say she had a weapons license that expired in 2024 and that the guns were previously taken from the home. Here is more of what police said about that.
Police have attended that residence in the past, approximately a couple of years ago, where firearms were seized under the criminal code. I can say that at a later point in time, the lawful owner of those firearms petitioned for those firearms to be returned, and they were.
Now, police also say that none of those firearms used in this shooting were registered to Van Rootselaar. The Premier, David Eby, says he's reached out to public health to see what kind of interaction interaction happened with those calls in terms of the calls received about mental health, and what kind of follow-up was done as well. RCMP are looking into those prior interactions with police as well, so a lot of follow-up there.
Okay, and also there's a little bit of digging that certainly we've been doing at CBC News to learn more about the family situation, looking at court documents. What have we learned?
So one of those court documents says the family describes them as almost nomadic in how they were moving around, specifically between Newfoundland and BC. The mother's former partner filed an application to have the family stay in BC and for the children not to be removed. But there was a lot of moving around in those 5 years. You can still see on social media what's left that's still posted. What seems to be typical family life, the mother sharing examples of achievements and the kids' birthdays. There's nothing aside from potentially that YouTube video that indicates anything out of the ordinary.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you for this. That is the CBC's Stephanie Skandaris reporting.
Black babies cost less.
An Inglewood mother's outraged after a daycare worker right there threw a shoe at her autistic 5-year-old daughter. That whole thing was caught on camera. Our Nick Garcia is live in Inglewood with the story you'll see only on Fox 11. Nick?
Right, Christine, well, that family of that child is demanding justice. You saw a bit of that footage there. The woman seen there throwing the shoe has been fired, but the family would like to see her behind bars. We're going to show you more of that video now, but first a warning, it may be hard to watch. A betrayal of trust. An employee of Destiny Development Center in Inglewood trusted to care for children, doing the opposite. Watch this classroom footage from January 16th. You see the 5-year-old dressed in orange to the right of your screen. Now pay close attention to the woman in the light-colored sweater. You see her take off her shoe and hurl it at the child, hitting her ear. She immediately starts crying.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to actually hit you.
Broke my heart. I couldn't believe it. The other people that have seen the video are like, wait a minute, is this fake? No, this is real.
Why would you throw a shoe at a child?
The child's grandmother and aunt spoke with us on behalf of her mom, who was understandably shaken. The family is also shocked that there were 2 other employees in the room when the incident happened. Both failed to report it.
How do you see a kid be abused and not take action? How do you not speak up? The video shows me, their reaction shows me that they were comfortable in what they did.
Fox 11 has confirmed with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department that there is an open investigation, but no arrests have been made. We also went to the daycare center looking for answers.
This is not a representation of my school. It's a representation of a bad hire.
Williams says all 3 women seen in the video have been fired, and she reported the incident to the state child care licensing program.
It's not what we stand for. We don't approve of abuse. I've been doing this for too long. I have a heart for kids. I love what I do. I love children.
The family says they want charges to be brought against the 3 women in hopes they'll never be allowed to work with children again.
People send their children to daycares and to schools thinking that our children are safe, that they'll be protected, they'll be loved, they'll be treated with kindness. And in this video, that did not display that at all.
Now, again, the Sheriff's Department only able to confirm to us that an active child abuse investigation is ongoing. But this whole thing certainly making the family wonder about what else could have happened on that woman's watch. Live in Inglewood, I'm Nick Garcia, Fox 11 News.
Right now at 6, Westerville police are investigating tonight after Westerville North High School postponed its Black History Month program.
This after officials say they received multiple threats of potential violence tied to the event. Tonight, 10 TV's Kristen McFarland is learning when the rescheduled program will be. Kristen?
Yeah, Yolanda, that's right. Police are investigating the threat right now. School leaders say that performance will happen here at the high school, rescheduled for Monday, February 16th. Now, here's what we know happened so far. A 7 p.m. start time for Westerville North High School's Black History Month program was canceled just hours before the show was set to begin. Principal Kurt Yancey sent a letter to parents explaining the decision. A spokesperson for Westerville City Schools says the district received multiple threats tied to the event. Yancey says the safety and well-being of students, staff, and community members remains the top priority. Holly Merchlin, chief of the Westerville Division of Police, says officers immediately began working with school leaders to investigate.
Any type of threat to anybody's safety, and especially in the schools, we work diligently to track down the source of those threats, and sometimes that takes a bit of time.
Chief Merchlin says threats need to be taken seriously and can carry serious consequences.
If you're causing so much alarm in the community to where an event such as this has to be canceled or postponed, that of course can affect the kind of charges that you're looking at, because you are inducing panic.
Again, that performance is rescheduled for Monday. School leaders also say for those planning to attend, you can expect to see more officers during and after the event. Reporting live in Westerville, Kristen McFarland, 10 TV News.
Across the sea, I suppose they're free. I suppose they're free outside of this place known as Chicago. Known as Chicago. Known as Chicago. Known as Chicago. Chicago. What you doing to me, Chicago?
A Chicago mom is furious about the way her son's class at a Northwest Side elementary school kicked off Black History Month. According to her son, the teacher had them participate in a reenactment of slavery. WBEZ's Sarah Karp reports.
Alexis Williams knew something was wrong when her 9-year-old came home from school last Tuesday. His whole demeanor was different.
And he was like, Mom, I had to leave class because I felt very uncomfortable today in class. And I was like, okay, so what happened?
What he told her stunned her.
And he said, well, my teacher started to talk about slavery, and then he made me play as like a dictator instead of calling it what it is. He made my son pull one of his classmates out of his chair,
William's son told her that other students were asked to use tape, meant to symbolize chains, to bind a classmate's hands.
And told my son that they would be put in cages and shipped off for slavery.
William says her son felt singled out and like he did something wrong. He's the only black student in his third grade class, and just 4% of students at his school, Portage Park Elementary, are black. Chicago Public School officials said they do not support reenactments of slavery in any way. History instruction must never place students in roles that could cause emotional harm, they said.
It can often re-traumatize and stigmatize and, frankly, dilute the legacy of that which was slavery.
That's Jose Vilson. He's the executive director of EduColor, an organization that supports and elevates teachers of color. Vilson is surprised that this happened. He points out that a lot of resources are available that can help educators develop age-appropriate lesson plans around slavery.
Truly, I'm shook for the person who is 9 years old having to reckon with this firsthand and without the deep context that's necessary to fully understand the breadth of the inhumanity there.
Chicago Public Schools actually has a vetted social studies curriculum. They took pains to make it sensitive to kids from different backgrounds. And though it's optional, according to CPS's website, Portage Park uses it. But CPS says this lesson on slavery was not part of the approved curriculum. WBEZ reached out to the teacher and principal, but neither responded. Williams says the teacher did apologize over text for not informing her that students were going to learn about slavery, but in a follow-up conversation denied that the reenactment happened. Still, Williams says her son's reaction, nightmares, and so many questions convince her that he's telling the truth.
Now my son is traumatized. Now we're having uncomfortable conversations. We're having to really tell him about slavery and things because you gave him misinformation. And now it's like I'm re-traumatizing him because this was a really bad time, especially for people that look like everyone he's always known.
The school district is now reviewing the lesson the teacher used and working to make sure that William's son feels safe. Williams and her son's father chose Portage Park Elementary because they saw it as a calm school in a quiet neighborhood. She says her son has close friends there and has had a good experience. But now she's questioning how the school handles Black history in general and whether it really is the best place for her son, who's just the sweetest child. Sarah Karp, WBZ News.
I can feel it deep inside, this black nigger's pride. I have no fear when I say, and I say it every day, every nigger is a star. Every nigger is a star. Who will deny that you and I and every nigger is a star?
The mother of a Chesapeake high schooler is wondering what will happen next after she claims her son was called a racial slur during a basketball game. She took her concerns to the Chesapeake School Board and spoke to our Markeisha Jackson.
The mother of that Great Bridge sophomore tells me she feels the ball is now in the school division's court. What was supposed to be a normal matchup between the Great Bridge High School and Hickory High School junior varsity basketball teams quickly took a turn.
Ultimately, my son was removed from the game for his adverse response to racial harassment.
Tiana Morton says the ejection is unusual for her son, who loves playing basketball. But Friday's game brought up intense emotions after she says someone on the Hickory team directed a racial slur at her son. She was in the crowd during the game and says the referees had been made aware of the language. You can hear her in this video pointing it out. The game continued, and ultimately her son reacted. Both sides trying to separate players. Morton tried to reach her son on the court, but was stopped.
but the male police officer did stop me and say there's no law against a word.
She says she immediately began reaching out to Chesapeake Public School officials, contacting the principal of Hickory High School.
When I did speak with Hickory prior to coming here, it did let me know that it was confirmed that children were saying the N-word on the court, but they are not confirming who said it.
Chesapeake Public Schools sent us a statement saying they are aware of the concerns that have been raised regarding the game, noting that there are clear procedures in place for reviewing the concerns in coordination with the Virginia High School League. The VHSL pointed me to this rule, which explains the disciplinary actions they could take in this situation.
I'm hoping that there are some policies that are put in place and that this is an equitable investigation.
Morton says her son is currently under a suspension due to his reaction. No word yet on if any Hickory players are facing the same. The school division says they are unable to comment on any potential disciplinary action. The VHSL says they will work in collaboration with the schools to review the incident. In Chesapeake, Markeisha Jackson, 10 on your song.
Not only do we have the best defense in the world, we got the best team in the world. And quite frankly, if you got anything to say for my quarterback, you got anything to say for my defense, you got anything to say for my O-line, and you got anything to say about the city of Seattle, I got two words for you. Fuck you!
Black History Month 2026. Context of White Supremacy. The worthless Negro from Virginia. Wish Ernest Jones he could add on to that. Do you have anything to say about Gusty and the cows? There you go. 206, 206, 206. Context of White Supremacy. The Compensatory Call-In. Our weekly forum, not for spectators, to share thoughts, observations on the system of white supremacy. Questions, observations, counter-racist suggestions. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see. Things to share. I will have to update because there are time differences and all of that wackiness to adjust. We should be on the air some irregular times even over the next week. I will say since like the end of December, I think right around the time we're having the really bad weather in the Seattle area, thought we were going to float away briefly. We have had guests on, white guests on from the area of the world known as Puerto Rico, white guests on from the area of the world known as Germany, non-white guests on from the area of the world known as Norway, and we should have a guest on the program shortly from the area of the world known as Australia. Wacky. Even though that last one was not, that was kind of a, because that's like massive time difference. So that is everything that's on that side of the planet, the New Zealands and Australia. We've had people from that region like, man, it is a monstrous time difference. It is a little challenging. It's almost you have to catch them the next day to do the program. Massive planet, dominated by the system of white supremacy racism. But we will do's it up soon. Just check social media and such for the exact time, since there might be some wacky timing for the broadcasts. I will say quickly, they talk all that about athletics and sports and all of that. Nothing changed, even in the city of the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. It is still brain damage. Get rid of the football. Hopefully, I did my part. We broadcasted live during the game, even though our guest flaked on us, white, practiced racism, but said the hope play Dr. Welsing. prepared for our guest the following day from Norway, talking about Anders Breivik and all the Anders Breivik. Anyway, but we did our part in reminding attempted parents, do not let your black child sit out in front of the TV and such. Man, I at least to take 30 seconds about the parade and all that from the Super Bowl. Not that that's the most important thing in the world, but man, they had that parade here on Wednesday for the Super Bowl and all that. They put in the Seattle Times paper and on television too, the Seattle Police Department that you heard about in the segment, they posted like get out of school passes so that the children in the Seattle region and perhaps beyond could feel free to ditch school for the Wednesday and head to downtown Seattle or the stadium to take part in the parade, which was happening around like noon and earlier during school hours. And I thought, man, it was so many people. They said, well, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Children, little people, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I said, no, it is not. Wait a minute. Did Marshawn Lynch, did that not happen? It was so many people said it. I just, wait a minute. I'm not no sports historian. I have not lived in Seattle all my life, but man, we have been to the Super Bowl 4 times. I didn't even live in this city my whole life. We have been to the Super Bowl 4 times since I have been in the city. We've won it twice since if I wanted to, I could have gone to 2 championship parades and cut a fool out in the street. It was really cold last time around, so I mean, man, it would have had to been back to back, and we embarrassed Tom Brady. It would have had to been. It was so cold the first time that they won the Super Bowl. They were talking about how cold it was last time this week, and that was 12 years ago. It was one of ooh, Lord, remember how cold? I had to have on 15 pair of socks at it. Man, come on. Brain damage, and I got to freeze it. Come on. Anyway, but so many people said that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. One, that's not true. They've won 2 Super Bowls. Now, I'm not even bragging. It's just a statement of fact. The Patriots and other franchises, they could say more or equivalent, whatever the case may be. But they've won it twice. So, I mean, no, it's not a once-in-a-lifetime event at all. And I am a no-count broke Negro male. I accidentally stumbled into Los Angeles when they were about a day away from having their parade for having won the World Series. So no, it really is not that. And the children were just doing all of that. We got to get out of school. And the Seattle Mariners, that's the baseball team here, they were 1 game away from the World Series this year, months ago, weeks ago. So the children just went through all of that for the baseball team. That might be okay for white children. Victims of white supremacy, I have heard my whole life, you niggers focus way too much on the basketball, and you niggers focus way too much. Matter of fact, they'll say, what should we do? Niggers, Leroy and Jamal, they shooting each other and got the gangs and the blue and the red, and they go each other and beef and all that. What we gonna do? I know, basketball at midnight. They've told that for years. That's all you niggers do is talk about basketball to your detriment. You won't get a book in basketball, this, and play basketball and watch basketball and Mike Jordan. And why in the world is it now? Hey, Leroy, don't go to school. And in fact, the police said, the very police, they're going to be nigger knockering you in a month or 2, maybe sooner. But for today, don't worry about going to school. We going to go downtown. Woo! It's going to be lit in more ways than one. It's going to be lit. Woo! That is crazy. I might even add the AH on that for victims of white supremacy. Like, man, it's bad enough they said half of the teachers didn't go to school on Wednesday, and they were playing it on TV, which is what they do for the basketball season and all of that is poison for black children. We need a brand new way of thinking. Like, and I can tell you, I was here when they won the Super Bowl last time. What changed for black people? Nothing. There's fewer black people here that live in Seattle now than when they won it last time. So, and I don't even know that it did anything really for white people in Seattle. I think they said it may have been helpful for some Seattle of the downtown businesses that were really hurt after COVID-19 and people working remote and that sort of thing. But I mean, matter of fact, oh my God. Anyway, that's for the children. If you live in a city where they have a professional sports team, even if your team wins the chip, make your child go to school. Unless it's summertime, then, whatever. But if it's during school, no, that is not a valid, and it should be explained just that way. Like, are you serious? Don't they say we got disposable Negro athletes and they will go broke? Some of the very black people on this parade right now, they're going to go broke and mismanage their finances. Don't they say that? They've been saying that for years. No, and I would tell them just that way. White children in a system of white supremacy, they can miss school. They got all the nepotism and cronyism set up. You can't. You'll be down there with the police officers who will be looking to arrest you and then telling you should have went to school. Come on. Anyway, beyond all of that, I'm so glad I did not go to the parade. I don't think I had grasped in my mind there are going to be close to 1 million people in the very part of Seattle that I have told you all I loathe visiting anyway. Having or a little less than 1 million drunk people crammed in. And matter of fact, we could fast forward all this. They put, like 2 days in advance, they put in the paper, they said, every available officer. This is the same Norm Stamper Police Department, nigger knocker, same police department that was under consent decree for beating up niggers, non-white people, for like a decade. Every available officer. What about that sounds appealing? If I had children, I would tell them, say, now, what about that sounds appealing in a system of white supremacy racism? These are the people y'all been watching and protesting and hashtagging and all that. What about that sounds appealing in an area of town I tried to avoid? They were walking and they were showing the route. They had the parade route in the paper in advance. But as you watch it on TV, if you watch, oh my God, they're walking by the courthouse. I've talked about King County Courthouse downtown repeatedly. Do you want to know when specifically I talked about King County Courthouse? 2021. Not for the pandemic. The staff at King County Courthouse, they were protesting. This is in the front page of the very Seattle Times I just mentioned. They were protesting unsafe work conditions. They said, man, people are getting gang raped in the bathroom at King County Courthouse. They walked right past that on the parade route. Matter of fact, I mentioned King County Courthouse twice. I said I was just at Milwaukee County Courthouse this past spring. Shot A.C. Robinson murder trial. I said it was so grueling. There were several days over those weeks of coverage. I would go outside. They'd give us our lunch break. It was spring. I would go sit outside. It was quiet. They had benches set up like a little park area outside the courthouse, and I would just sit, eat my lunch. Sometimes I would work on my computer. Sometimes I would just sit quietly, close my eyes, and try and get some of those images and thoughts out of my brain computer and just sit quietly. When I got back to Seattle and I went to the courthouse, I said, oh my Lord, there is no way I would sit out here and try and have some tranquil moments, 5 minutes to sit here and think. Man, come on. Matter of fact, if you watch the parade, you will see them going by some of the homeless encampments in downtown Seattle. Like, man, in addition to the little less than 1 million people and all of the enforcement officers. And matter of fact, what do I say all the time? One of the most dangerous combinations in the known universe. White people, alcohol, all of the public drunkenness that was on, man. And it was children there too. They had it was a white woman with a pony. Like, man, come on. It's already way too much danger in the system of white supremacy racism. I did not need 1 million rowdy drunkards and children playing hooky from school with armed enforcement officers acting crazy. Moving on, next season of Brain Damage, more to come. And I would have been arrested too. I feel like, in all of that, they would have had me on TV for some reason. They would have said I tried to mug Sam Darnold or something. Footage of me getting handcuffed and shackled and they said everybody was mostly well behaved. But if I had gone, I know, for some reason, like, Gus T, you see he got arrested at the championship. Watched it on TV safely. I will say, one thing I learned from the Seahawks' triumph and smacking around the Patriots and such, it is very difficult to predict what is going to happen in the future. Very difficult. There were several folks, they went and did their rewind. They said, wow, you go back to the end or the beginning of this football season, right here in Seattle, nobody was saying we're about to win the Super Bowl. In fact, people were furious. And then the wacky part, why were they mad? Seattle dumped not 1, 2 consecutive black quarterbacks to pick up a white quarterback who no one wanted in the league. They didn't even want him here. In fact, Seahawks' own fans, not all of them, but a sizable chunk of them groused. You got rid of a Negro quarterback. You being cheapskates to bring in this no-count white dude we didn't even want. And nobody wanted. That's the sort of thing that was being said at the beginning of the football season. It was not, we are about to win the Super Bowl and do it up and not at all. And in fact, it was so wacky what happened. Not only did they dump 2 black quarterbacks to get a white quarterback no one wanted, a black general manager who did not want this white quarterback got fired as a result of this white quarterback's success here. Wacky all the way through. Anywho, that's one thing I learned, though. The future is very difficult to predict what's going to happen and all of that. So definitely I would be somewhat, I've heard sometimes where we can be upset with black people because apparently they did not correctly anticipate things that were going to happen. That can be very challenging. Next, my other football rule, and it doesn't even relate to the Seahawks. Our no-count nemesis, Tom Brady, they say learned from the best, one of the best white men on the planet, they tell me. Old Tom Brady said, we had our rule in my heyday, ancient times, when I played. The rule was, if you are going to talk to another person, someone sticks a microphone in your face, you get on a TV program, a podcast, whatever. If you are going to say anything other than a compliment, the only person that you should be talking about is yourself. That's not nothing earth-shattering or new. Mr. Fuller said for years, resist the urge to criticize non-white people. Practically everyone ignores that. That should be the rule for counter-racism. no criticizing non-white people, even the non-white people you don't agree with. You say, hey, not all white peoples is racist, and anybody who thinks otherwise, you, Gus, is a no-count coon. Hey. You can leave all that part out and just, not all white peoples is racist. That's it. You don't have to even get into the people that you don't like and don't agree with and all that foolishness, and particularly deficiencies, all of that. I've said for years, man, if you want to start talking about, hey, what you haven't covered and you haven't done enough sufficiently to examine this, you haven't done enough research on that, you haven't done enough reading on this, start with I, the only pronoun you need. I haven't done enough, because clearly none of us can truthfully say we've done enough. None of us can truthfully say, hey, I got it. There should not be any, oh my God, Leroy, you so naive and ignorant and stupid. Whoa. Every non-white person I know is still a victim of white supremacy. There should not be any of that, and I stand by my record. We've been here for 17 years. We got a white guest only policy, so I try to talk to white people. I say, if it's going to be an argument, we're going to get sassy, and you don't know what the hell you talking about. I'm supposed to be talking to somebody classified as white. Stand by our record, what we've been on. We have a non-white person on the program. I say I'm breaking the rule, and that's not, I'm ready to break the rules, and you don't know what you're talking about. You stupid, dumb, and ignorant, naive. Come on. If there's going to be any criticizing of a non-white person, really, for any reason, and if you're not going to do that, come on, shut up. And certainly you are not modeling Neely Fuller Jr., the cows. I don't even think you're doing anything. Really, you sport enjoyed by all. Certainly do not call this program to talk about somebody is naive. We had that happen the other day. Step back. Wait a minute. I wouldn't care who you're talking about, but to say Dr. Paul Thomas is naive, I wouldn't care if I disagreed with everything he had to say in the world about every subject matter for the rest of his life, even if that were true. He migrated from the continent, went to a predominantly white racist country, got a doctorate, and wrote 2 books about racism. Who in the F, thank you, Ernest Jones, are you to talk about somebody is naive or ignorant? And I would say that to any of you all in the universe forever. Who is you? Where is your book? What have you done? Are you still a victim of white supremacy racism? If the answer is yes, shut the Ernest Jones the Fourth up. What is all of that? Naive, and all of the victims of white supremacy racism are naive. Period. And you calling out other victims of racism is naive. That is not progressive. We do that all day long, all night long, and apparently we do that all over the world. It is not constructive. If it's going to be some criticizing, Mike Jackson, we say we love Mike. Didn't he do that? I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Oh, patriarchal, sexist. I'm asking him to make a change. Didn't he have Bubbles? That was Mike Jackson's gorilla. It was Bubbles. It was Bubbles looking like Obama's cousin. That's it. Anyway, he said, I'm looking at that's who you go do your criticizing about, not Leroy and Lakeisha and the rest of us for not, like, come on. Anyway, that's one for 17 years, what we've learned. Hopefully what we have modeled more importantly. Speaking of monkeys, I did get my review of Primate posted. It is on my blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. The bot, although resistant to my counter-racist interpretation at first, eventually crumbled and co-signed completely, which I was kind of surprised about. But I mean, come on. Anyway, but you can read the blog. I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to watch the film. If you've seen any of the Planet of the Apes, King Kong, any of the other, you've already seen it. If you've seen any of the commentary about black people and monkeys, you've already seen it. You can just read the review to get all the details, try to be precise about the many components of what is in this lynching spectacle primate. But it's on the blog, and then you'll see top right corner the PayPal button. Beneath the button are the links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude to all the investors who kept us on the air for 17 years. Hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy, accurate more often than not. Let's see. Some of the segments that, before we get to some of the segments, I will say this quickly just for, we were talking about this on the book club on yesterday, man. We just finished, right? Shar Adams, Black Owned, The Revolutionary Life of the Black Book Store. She has a top 10, is it a top? It's not a top 10 list per se. It's just a black booksellers, black booksellers want everyone to read. That's what it's called. And so they have the top 10 list for the books. Now, I talked about this yesterday. I'm just reiterating it today because of information that I saw between this time yesterday and now. So the 10 books that were recommended are Toni Morrison's Beloved, published in 1987, Malcolm X's autobiography, published in 1965, Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, published in 1933, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, published in 2010, 100 Years of Lynching, Ralph Ginsberg, published in 1962, Assata Shakur's autobiography, published in 1987, How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America, published in 2021, James Baldwin's The Price of the Ticket, published in 1985, Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, published in 1937, and Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, published in 1972. Now, I said yesterday, certainly what I just said, victims guaranteed qualified. I do not have any. Reading is more important than watching television and nonfiction, which is reflected in this literature list because it's mostly nonfiction, only 2 works of fiction. But what I said is, man, the average date of publication for these 10 books is 1976, and that is with a round up. There are only 2 books on this list that have been published in the last 30 years, actually the last 35 years. 2. Now I said, hey, some of these books that are older are very constructive. Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation, very constructive. Minister Malcolm X, over 60 years old now, still very constructive. All of that said, and most of these books are very constructive. All of that said, I said yesterday, like, wow, no constructive work has built on this scholarship this century. The last 25 years, no black scholars have built on this work and advanced and dealing with some of our more current problems and that sort of thing to get us close to solving this problem. I also said, dang, if these books, if the scholarship from the 20th century is sufficient and that's all we need, is the problem that we didn't read these books? They would have to tell me something, because that's just like, wow, that just like, man, it's a lot of books that are not there, and or that's a long period of time to have not too much representation. Anyway, so this was yesterday, and you just heard the books. Subsequently, I was looking and going through bookstore and black newspaper publications for, we'll say, the last 30 to 40 years, And I was surprised because there were a number of black book lists popping up in some of these publications. Essence, the LA Sentinel, which is a black newspaper in California, and some other listings. Even SO1 had some listings. Most, or I won't say most, but there was an alarming, I'm even going to retract alarming. I was searching for the word. There was a pitiful repetition in these book lists, both from that time period, because I looked at a number of book lists from like the beginning of the century, 2000s, late 90s, and then to the list that we just got from a book that was published in 2025. It was pitifully similar in terms of the books that were recommended. Now again, I don't have anything bad about these books, nor anybody who puts these books on the list, but man, if someone says, can you give me a list of books for black people to read, Gus T, I'm just speaking for myself, I think that that is pitiful, and that is indicative of a problem. If I say, give me a list of books for black people to read that are constructive to deal with racism, and I talk to you in 2000, and then I come back to you in 2025, and it's the exact same list, Ernest Jones, WTF, I reached my max. You're supposed to say G-rated, so that's the max for the, but I mean, you'd have to maybe I'm not seeing it correctly. I don't. Now again, if these books, if it's going to be that much repetition, it's almost like you're saying these books are all we need. Like all we got to do is read these 5, read these 10, and we're going to have this thing licked. That would lead me to think, did we not read these books and apply the information therein? It would leave me with a lot of questions. The main one, when I see other book lists, I told you we found this book, Shar Adams, Black Owned. We found this because they do book lists at the end of every year about the best books that came out every year. They don't look the same. They're all brand new. What came out here and that sort of thing. Not a total repetition. And again, I'm not saying every black person's book list looks as though, or I hope not, but man, but just I looked at this was not looking at like one or two. This was looking at several, and I already had this one, and this was over quite a few decades. I guess everybody can put Minister Malcolm. Part of my thinking would be, dang, at this point, I think most people, like I said yesterday, if you're 12, okay, you haven't read Minister Malcolm X, right on. But I mean, they've had that in schools, for a long time, and Spike Lee did the movie and all the rest of it. Like, wow. I said black culture is not reading. If it's that black people don't read, okay, the book list might not be too helpful. If we're not going to read them anyway, we would have to do something to address us not reading, right? Just trying to process it, but that stood out like supremely, pitifully, seeing that repetition, unless you're telling me like these are just the bestest books ever on racism, the most constructive, even though like so much time has passed, like it doesn't have any data about AI and all that, how that's going to factor, like all of that is missing from all of these books listed. Anyway, something to ponder on, folks. If you see more diverse book lists, you can share. Let's see, specific things that we heard in the reports, audio reports, beginning of today. We started with the report about the Beaver Creek, or what is it, Dams Creek Star? I don't watch that show, so, but he passed away, and he was only, I think, like 50, really young. They were talking about folks who, or he specifically, had colorectal cancer. And it immediately, I started with D'Angelo. He did not have colorectal cancer. D'Angelo passed away at 51. He had pancreatic cancer, unless I've been misinformed. Chadwick Boseman, he left us at 43. He had colon cancer, not quite the same as colorectal cancer, but all of these are gastrointestinal cancers, and they almost took the words out of Dr. Lathan's mouth, lifestyle cancers, bad diet, no exercise, Mad Dog 2020, kind of with the diet that they have set up for black people to consume in great deal all over the known universe, really, because they were talking about getting the Nestle in the formula, so they get us all that sugar in our system for the black people that are on the continent, wanting us to have bad food so that we're in really bad health at a very early age. That's what they were saying. More and more people getting this at 50. Is it something in the environment? Is it the food? Is it a combination of all of that? Probably. And white people probably already know. Dawson's Creek, that's what it is. Dawson's Creek. But again, I don't watch these shows, so I don't feel bad about, ooh, I would sit around Dawson's Creek, the show where the young fella passed away. But gastrointestinal cancers, that right there would be a reason. I know tons of people, and you can put Gus T in that group as well. Tons of people are not fans of cooking. I get it. I don't like having to wash all those dishes, and you have to clean up the kitchen, and sometimes you spill stuff, and sometimes you might even mess it up from time to time if you burn something or don't keep an eye on it or it just doesn't come out correctly. Hey, it is way better in terms of the investment to go ahead, get your hands dirty, put your hands on a potato from time to time, peel that garlic, chop up some onions, touching and preparing your own food as opposed to doing a whole lot of ordering out. Those ultra processed foods, they catch up with you in a lot of ways. Sometimes the catching up with you is D'Angelo, 51. Chadwick Boseman, 43. Fella from Dawson's Creek too that I don't watch. That's how it catches up with you. Like, yeah, the Uber, DoorDash and Uber Eats and all of that. Yep, we can do all that, but a lot of that stuff is ultra processed too. It would be a way better benefit, way better counter-racist plan, preparing our own food and trying to get progressively healthier so we can get a little bit more fiber in there, getting those veggies in there. Let's see. They had the segment they were talking about down in Houston. Oh man, it's been 5 years. Thomas in New York. I play that segment consistently. That is one thing that I say. If you're going to go and talk to black people, have accurate, correct information. I did not hear nothing in that segment about this was green energy initiatives and that's why this happened. Really, I heard a lot of what they said 5 years ago. We got a lot of outdated, dilapidated technology that we have not properly updated, and we don't have proper regulations down here in the Texas region. We allow white people to do whatever they want, and even specifically, they had Sade Hogue on, and that was audio. I suspect that could have been a black female. They have a lot of black people in the Houston area, but it was audio, so I don't know. But I do know in the Houston area, because it's unregulated, they have lots of black people in places in Houston. Devontae, they have lots of black people in the Houston region where they got all that, like they live in LA where they got all that asthma and pollution and everything else. That's where a lot of the Dr. Robert Bullard is down close to that region, studied right in his own backyard. They had the young lady on, Sade Hogue. She was talking about how, man, that power went off and it was all freezing and cold and blah, blah, and they even had some of the black people said, man, I was pregnant. I was scared it was going to do something to my baby and blah, 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 and all that. It would not surprise me. You end up with a whole lot of black people being impacted by either the blackouts and or all of the unregulated energy production that they have in Texas, leading to the pollution and the blackouts. Either way, I did not hear nothing about no green energy initiatives being the cause in there. Sade Hogue did say, after what happened 5 years ago, she was going to take steps to be more prepared. She was talking about getting her food to be ready in advance. We had done programs on that, talking about being prepared, storms, emergency situations like that, floods, snowstorms, whatever the case may be. Even it could be extreme heat. Especially if you have medical needs, pregnancy for sure qualifies. If you have young children or children period, that's, obviously you're going to have to take extra precautions to make sure the little folks are taken care of, safe, can be fed and everything during those events. But man, take it seriously. And even remembering Katrina, that Dr. Thomas, so humble, he requested, books to read, Better Grasp of Racism. One book that I suggested, Katrina After the Flood. I think particularly even people in the U.S., but especially people that are not outside or that are outside the U.S., I think for a singular event to reveal so much about white supremacy, racism, and then you get the 10-year perspective on it in terms of the rebuild and the black population that was lost in New Orleans and how they suffered. But one component that he also includes in that book, and that I told Dr. Thomas about, I said when Hurricane Katrina happened, and even while the flood waters were still high, you had white enforcement officers and just plain white civilians. Oh man, we can go kill niggers. That's one of the first programs that what we've been doing for 17 years, Gus T. A.C. Thompson, white vigilante violence in Hurricane Katrina. That's one of the first programs we did, 2009. We just got back on the air. Knew what we doing as soon as we picked up the microphone, yes? But that's one of the books that I shared because of that. Is so many layers of white supremacy, but the violence. When you get niggers at their most vulnerable, they didn't come to bring water, which, hey, even if you say Leroy and them been looting down there in the Ninth Ward and all the rest of it, and then bringing all their looting behavior to Houston, hey, we'll bring in water and diapers and supplies in that way. That way, you don't have to do no looting. You can behave yourself. We can get everybody safe and calm all this down. Oh, no. I got to get my AK-47. I'm going to put a cap in Leroy. And then brag about having done so. Katrina's signature work, but that was one of the books that I recommended. And then even paired that what Thomas said, President Trump, what they say, rolling back the EPA protections. This ain't nothing about we going green energy and going to be making energy grids more vulnerable. The white people, Dr. Kamal Kamban, he called them cesspool-ians. Said they just foul up and filth up the whole planet. Can't breathe the air, can't drink the water, can't even plant a tomato. That is cesspool-ian behavior after they've already got the science and data and told you. Planet getting warmer. You see them wildfires in L.A.? He just shut down the wind turbines, played the report about that. They're going in the exact opposite direction. If anything, I'll say again, what was one thing you learned from the Seahawks' triumph? Predicting the future can be very, very difficult. Let's see. And now, in addition to white people being cesspool-ians, all of this rolling back on environmental protections, and we're not doing any of this. We're not going to participate in so-called climate change, and that's, a bunch of poppycock anyway. I think that could be a part of end-stage white supremacy, that, hey, it's not going to be enough white people on the planet. Forget it. We'll just trash the whole place, and if it's going to be a bunch of dark people here, then you all will be suffering in all this muck and filth that we've left you. I could easily see that being, really, that's kind of in Planet of the Apes, but for another day. They had the report talking about Dametria McDile. She's a black female victim of white supremacy who died in police custody in Missouri. You heard her bereaved family talking about they didn't care about her, how she was terrified and mistreated. In a chilling manner, it reminded me of Kimberlee Randle-King, black female. She also died in police custody 2015. She was also in Missouri. I wrote about that case some years back. We had C.O.W.S listeners who were connected with that case. They have, I know in the Missouri region at that time, this is within, 2015 or so, that was a part of a pattern of suspicious inmate deaths, either them committing suicide, all the trauma of being confined and mistreated, all the rest of it, alleged officer abuse, which could be a part of the suicide, but there were a number of suspicious cases at that time, not just Kimberlee Randle-King, and that was she took her own life. I think that was within a few days of Sandra Bland down in Texas once again. But anyway, that if anything, Fuller talked about for a long time, try to do everything that you can to stay out of greater confinement. Even that was part of my thinking about the parade, but he did talk about that. We are in a system of white supremacy, and I mean, hey, sometimes it's totally unavoidable. They will lock you up for breathing sometimes, often, or whatever the accusation is, but just try to do the best that you can to stay out of greater confinement, and maybe even try and, if you have attempted relatives and such, maybe even talk about a plan. If something does happen, if they pull you over and say your paperwork is incorrect and that sort of thing, so that you can survive that, maybe talk about that as best we can as well, to try to survive if something terrible does happen, which, you know, it is the system. But Mr. Fuller did say, for many, many reasons, let us all try as best we can to not get in greater confinement. Dametria McDile, Kimberlee Randle-King, many, many illustrations of this happening. Sandra Bland, as I just said, many, many illustrations of this happening. Once they get us in greater confinement, they can do a job on us, even if it is just mentally and psychologically. Khalif Browder, he got out of greater confinement, but still, they did a job. Let's see. It was not all celebrations here in the Seattle area. The enforcement, speaking of the damage that they can do, Janavi Kandula, my apologies if I did not pronounce her name correctly. I am a little retarded, or greatly retarded. 24 years old, non-white female, not black, but non-white female. This happened right here in the Seattle area. Officer was racing down the street to a scene, and I believe that we had talked about that this officer was racing down the street to an alleged overdose of a white person. Now, that what I tell you about the parade, that is a plenty in the Seattle region. Oh my God! But racing to some white crackhead overdose person who's, oh, life is valuable, we got to, and ran over a non-white person who is in school trying to go out and do great things, young, just getting started with her life. 25, she can't even be president, right? If you're 24, you got to be 25 and older to be president, right? She can't even run for president yet. She's so young, and gonna run her down to get to the scene of a white person. This did happen some years back. I will definitely go back to verify that it was going to check a white person, but oh man, it was right here in Seattle. They had, I was gonna call them bumper stickers, but they had stickers posted all over the city when this happened, talking about this. Anyway, I'll go back to verify that. They awarded the family $29 million. I guess, you know, I am very, very sure that her family and loved ones would much rather have her here, as opposed to the vile way that she died, and the total lack of regard. You heard the recording where the officer said, just cut a check. She's young. She didn't even have that much value. Man, I guarantee if this had been a white person, they would not have said it. Could have been one of these old white crackheads that we have an abundance of up here. White fentanyl heads, whatever that is. It could have been one of them. You wouldn't miss them. They got dozens. You wouldn't miss them. It would not. Oh, my Lord. Oh, we done ran over Tad. Can you believe it? He was shooting up in the street again. We told you about that shooting up. Oh, man. Oh. We got to tell his parents. Oh, we done ran over Tad. That's what it would be. It would not. Who cares? Tad, I told him to get out the street. Where's the broom at? Just shovel him on over. Shovel him. You don't even. Who cares? That's what you get, Tad. Get on out of here. It would not have been that if it had been a white person. I guarantee that on everything. Let's see. The segment on the Tuskegee Airmen, it was the segment on the new book, Forgotten Souls. That is a 2026 publication. There are books about racism all the time. I think that one qualifies. I guess people might, differ or what have you. It is about a historical. I guess some people might say that, well, that's a history book. True, but I think she did say racism is a big part of it, and racism is probably a massive part of how these 27 black males disappeared. I even thought while I was hearing all of that, Do we think something nefarious could have happened? I haven't read the book. It was just published. They might call it reckless speculation. Well, I mean, hey, I'm going to retract that. It's not reckless speculation because, Emmett Till's dad did get killed during World War II. Veteran. We talked about that. We did talk to the white filmmakers 2 times for Australia. The documentary film Black Soldier Blues. We talked to the white filmmaker about that project, and a massive chunk of that film is talking about, one, white people in Australia did not want no Negroes there, no how. Well, we need defense from the Japs. We do not want no Negroes down under, no how, mate. And then the Negroes and the white women. The white woman read us letters. Negroes been accused of raping Australian white women. Gonna be lynched in Australia. Call it an execution. Gonna be lynched in Australia. We'll give you a pen and pad so you can write your relatives about how you were a beast rapist and you got what you deserved. And these black males, privileged, wrote letters to their loved ones. We gonna be lynched in the morning for raping white women. We had the white Australian filmmaker. She read several of these letters on the program with us. So with that as some research on this subject matter, do you think it's possible these 27 black males, something nefarious happened to them? They got uppity, sassed a white person, danced with a white woman? Can't wait to read. That's what I mean, though. It's lots of books that come out about racism, white supremacy, lots and lots and lots. I think retired firefighter said he was into, war, studying war books, war history, that sort of thing. If you know people that are into all of that, or people that are just into racism, period. If you know veterans, black veterans, might be a book to read. Even on the sly, if I knew a black person and they were thinking about a military career, this might be a book that I drop and casual too, like, oh, because it just came out. That's what I say. Oh, the author, she was just on NPR. They had her for Black History Month and talking about all the courage and bravery of the black people who served, and just give it to them, and I wouldn't even say anything else. And then they get it up. Whoa, 20, they disappeared. Wait a minute. Whoa, they didn't. Dang, I'm gonna have to think about that. Dang, and Laverne Cox. Dang. But I do want to read that one, Forgotten Souls. And I said it was 2 on the Tuskegee Airmen. That case about Oscar L. Wilkerson, he was not one of the forgotten souls. He made it back, long life, many decades, productivity, probably lots of racism too. But oh man, the judge done looted all his money. That Patricia Martin, the judge, that was a black female. Oh, I could have vomited. Not that it would have been any better if it had been a white judge looting this black World War II veteran. But, ooh-wee, that one was, Black culture, you can put that one up for Black History Month as well. And for Bitcoin, I cashed him out to get in the... Anyway, let's see. The black female at the daycare center who was recorded throwing a shoe at one of the autistic children. Man, black babies cost less. This was a black female employee. They did not show the child, thankfully, obviously. I'm going to guess this is probably a black child who was struck with the shoe. I was thinking about, is this workplace racism? Or is this... Either way, I guess for parents who will prioritize the children, man, it's so much. I'm so glad I don't have children. It's so much to think about. If you have children, it's so expensive to have children. It's just man. And it was a small child as well. Like, I don't know how much they could have done to, upset someone to have a shoe thrown at them. Remember George Bush when that happened? Like, he did things to warrant having shoes and a whole lot else thrown at him. Katrina, lots of things. But yeah, a small child having a shoe thrown at them, like, man. Being an attempted black parent, most difficult job in the known universe. No comparison. I'm so glad I don't have black children have to go through the whole school vetting process and everything else from that. Speaking of the school vetting, so they had the Westerville North High School. They were going to have the Black History performance, but they got threats against the school and they had to shut it down. That's another one. I'm glad I do not have black children. Like, even like, what were the threats? Was it bomb threats, or just, we gonna come up there and smack some niggers around, or what type of, that too, to have to explain that to children, like, man, even a 14-year-old, like, not cool. And you heard that from a number of parents who said that when they had the separate report in Chicago where they had the slave reenactment and they were taping the children's wrists together, and the young person, he said he felt like he was singled out, like, now you go sell your classmate, go sell the fella down there. Man, the amount of homework that is required of you as the parent, I'm talking about investigating the school, going up to the school, even who has time for all of that if you have a job. Man. If you are able to homeschool or find alternatives, that would be great. But I mean, hey, this is the school system in the system of white supremacy racism. This is about what you can expect. Slave reenactment, all of it, really. Threats at the school, we're going to bomb the school, we're going to shoot up. That's about what you can expect. Shoe thrown at your child, that's about what you can expect in the system of white supremacy racism. They spoke with the parent. She was all traumatized as well, and saying, oh man, they got this reenactment with my child, and now he, is having nightmares and having difficulty sleeping and all the rest of it, and asking me all of these questions, which I did think was important. She said he was asking me all these questions, and I'm having to talk to him, tell him about all these things. Now, if this is like the genesis of these conversations, and they hadn't been talking about all of this before, that's totally messed up. That's not the way that you want to begin these dialogues with your children. My recommendation, you want to start early. And especially if your child is going to public school, like, oh man, like, you want to start 5, maybe even earlier, in detailing racism and making it child appropriate, but certainly talking to them about what all of this is. We talk to our children about other safety hazards, fire, water, strangers. There's no greater danger to a non-white child, and in so many different forms, than the system of white supremacy racism. Got to talk to your child and talk to him early, so that when these types of things happen, even the incident where the young fella at the basketball game and they were calling him nigger and all that, even then, we have already had a lot of discussions about this very thing. Being called a nigger, mistreated somehow, what to do. And even expecting these types of things to happen. Why? We are in a system of racism. So that did give me pause. Certainly not a criticism, because I don't have no children, so I ain't got no manual. I have no suggestion. Well, I do have a suggestion about talking to children, but hey, I don't have no children. I'm not no expert on child rearing. Not close at all. But talking to your child, so when these things come up, it's not that abrupt. What is going on? They don't like black people? They're doing this because we're black. Like, this is what we've been talking about. This is why I talk about this all the time and bring this up. This is why. Oh, so you can get more of that sort of a thing. And especially, and this is just victims guaranteed qualified, I would not want an incident of direct intimate abuse of my child. I wouldn't want that to be the catalyst for us starting a serious study and dialogue of racism. I would much rather have this start in a much healthier, safer location where we're not starting from an injury, where we can start from a sincere We are learning about the world. Like I would much rather talk to my child about fire safety before they get a burn. Talking about the dangers of operating the oven, cooking, why you want to wear oven mitts and all of that before they get the burn. I think that's the best way to do it. Certainly with racism, what it means to be white and what to expect in these sort of situations. And even with the school in Chicago where they did the slave reenactment, that is from Chicago, Portage Park Elementary School. That's the 60641 area code. I checked. Now, it doesn't look like they had a whole lot of black people in that area code. They said at that school, Portage Park Elementary, that it's about 4% black people. That sounds like a racially restricted region type demographic. That's one I don't have a criticism, but I would say as an attempted parent, because this is something that I wouldn't have thought about, sometimes they'll give you that choice. You can put your child in a school with a lot of black people, and it won't be clean. They'll have no toilet paper. There'll be one toilet in the building, and it'll be broken. You'll have the worst books, the worst teachers, no desks. You can go there, or you can put your child in a school where it's 3 black children, and we'll do slave reenactments. Bad choices. Bad choices. I'm not going to say which one is right or wrong. Bad choices. But if you're going to take the one where you put them with all white people, that's what I mean. Like, that conversation has got to be much earlier about what it means to be white. And this is an elementary school, so I am sure if my understanding of elementary school is correct, that's like, what, 8, 9, 7? Really, really young, tiny people. They still trying to just get the basics. 5 times 5 and 3 times 3. Don't get no more basic and fundamental than the system of white supremacy racism. We would have to start with that. Get them times tables too, but because it's going to be, hey, you get enough of the racism, that might disrupt you ever getting 5 times 5 is what? The slave reenacted messed me up so many times. I wasn't able to sleep last night. I'm agitated and fussy and all of the 5 times 5. What is it again? I am so glad I am not an attempted parent. Most difficult job in the known universe. Even the one about the basketball that we ended with, I will say, I have said the same thing I said with Super Bowl. See, most people not going to win the Super Bowl. You lose and they call you a nigger. That's how it goes. They said they were at the basketball game and they were yelling out, calling them nigger and all the rest of it. That happens like high school all the way up to the NBA Finals where they're going to yell out and call LeBron James a nigger. They've been documenting that for years. One thing they said in that news report, they said, and I believe the parent, black female mom, victim of racism, I believe she said that the officer told her there's no law against the word. Wrong. One, I thought immediately you cannot go yell fire in a movie theater. Unless I've been misinformed. They got court cases on that and all that. So that is not true. 2, we are at a school event, unless I have been misinformed. I have been taught like from a student capacity as well as an administrative capacity, any of these functions, a basketball game, a football game, even a speech or debate club event, all of these are school-sponsored activities. Therefore, the school code of conduct is in effect at these events. Therefore, you cannot run around and say racial slurs. At most schools that I know of, they have direct policies about that. You can't be ready to nigger, get out. You can't do that. Why is that now? All of a sudden, well, it's the basketball game. You can call anybody nigger you want. That is not true at all. And the officer, you should know. See, I think a lot of times they just lie to us. They flagrantly lie. Mr. Fuller, primary method of practicing racism, deception. You are supposed to be a law officer and you are lying about the policy. And that's one. If the mom had been out there yelling, crackers, my son, he gonna dunk on y'all, you no count crackers, the cracker can't jump, I bet he would not have. There ain't no law against word. You know, you got Ritz crackers and all types of crackers. Come on. And like I said, the school even said that we do have policies about people saying that. The NBA even got policies about that. They do not come out as a way, hey, you paid all that money to come down front and yell at Luka and everybody. No, man. You can't come down here and be yelling slurs and stuff. They will get the ushers and send you on out of here. Sometimes might even bar you from coming back permanently. All of that, I say again, no, there are things substantially more important than a high school basketball game. Even the Super Bowl parade, if it's in your hometown, which Seattle is not for me. Replacing white supremacy with justice is for sure one of them. And just frankly, for non-white people victims of racism, devaluing athletics, like, oh my God, like any and everything to devalue athletics. No, we're not going to the Super Bowl parade. No, I don't even think you should be on the high school basketball team. Like, are you going to get a scholarship for this, or is this just some running around for exercise so you could be called a nigger by screaming hooligans in the bleachers? Come on, man. Like, it's 2026. Like, we could do, and for Jerry Sandusky to molest, like, we leaving that part of it. Matter of fact, y'all remember that white football coach in Virginia on the run? They said he had all the child pornography. It's a whole lot. The brain damage should be enough, but I got a long list of reasons. Devalue the sports. We can do it. Whatever reason we saying we chasing it, we can get that elsewhere. Replace white supremacy with justice. We need that even more than a Super Bowl parade. Facts. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We did get kind of parent heavy. If we have attempted black parents, if you know, I don't know. What would you tell your child? Would you allow your child to be on the team? If they did the slave reenactment, are you letting them go back? Like, let us know what you think. Let's see. Folks who dialed in with the hand up. Line should be open. Proceed.
Greetings, everyone.
Retired firefighter in Florida. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was listening, and when you were talking about Tuskegee pilots, ironically, I ran into a story of one of them who, for 79 years, the only thing his family knew that he didn't come back. They don't know. They didn't never had found out anything about him. But let me go to the story right quick. Hold on. Yeah, they didn't know anything about it until finally they was able to. He was buried. Basically, what took place, he went on a mission to Germany, and I'm assuming he was on his way back when his plane crashed and he died. His name. He was a second lieutenant. His name was Fred Bauer Jr. But with this modern day science to identify a body, they finally was able to identify who he was. He was buried his body was buried in Italy. That's where the 99th and the 332nd Fighter Group, that's where they were located at for the most part, in Italy. And that's what he was buried at. But they finally found out on who he was with this science that they had. From my studies on that subject, because I heard you speaking about it earlier, from my studies on that subject about not knowing the death or where the body is or whatever for black soldiers. It's probably true. It's probably true, but they weren't. They, meaning the government, quote unquote, army, military force. They weren't good at it at all when it came down to it. Each war that I've studied, it improves somewhat. Of course, it's better now than it was back 70 years ago, 70, 80 years ago in World War II. It's better because they have better science and that sort of thing. But I would look at it from the evidence of they actually have a flag that states missing in action still, and that represents someone who went to a war and didn't come back. We don't know where he's at. That's that sort of thing. So it still is somewhat of a problem, especially in a particular situation where there's a lot of people getting killed, in a war. That would make it even more complicated. But that's basically what I came across with yesterday with this soldier by the name of Fred Browser's pilot. Fred Browser Jr. was his name. His final mission was on October the 29th, 1944. He was 23 years old at the time. Once they found all of this out, he was buried back in this part of the world, Salisbury National Cemetery, in December of 2023. So that's one thing that I found out on the subject. That's it.
Much obliged. Retired firefighter in Florida, Mr. Fred Brewer, Brewer, Tuskegee Airman. Probably lots of stories like this from World War II, even some of the other campaigns where they've had black soldiers, black victims of white supremacy. I thought, isn't that you, what I guess they call it, military history student? Isn't that you, or did I lie?
Oh yeah, I've been studying quote unquote war history since I was in elementary school, and it just I don't know exactly where it came from, but it probably came from the idea, and I've probably spoken about it. Richmond Heights its original development was a veteran had to put down $100 for a house. It had to be a black veteran. So that was all around me growing up, including in my household. Of course, my attempted dad, was in the military in Korean War, so that may have had something to do with it. I don't know for sure, but I've been involved in reading war, since elementary school, actually, and then once I started developing a study of racism, white supremacy, I matched the two together. You see a whole lot of similar circumstances in both. Yeah.
Much obliged. Just before we nab Lauren, the new book then, Forgotten Souls, by Cheryl W. Thompson, written by black female. She said that her dad is also a Tuskegee Airman. That's what sparked her interest in these 27 black males who disappeared, who I said maybe it was nefarious, maybe not. But Fuller did say, killing a black person, that is like killing a fly. And particularly black veterans like Neely Fuller Jr., long history of them being especially uppity and sassy and trying to counter racism might even fit. Mr. Fuller said he was in service. He was in Japan when he started writing out the code. Jackie Robinson got court-martialed. Geronimo Pratt. Like, it's a long history of upstart black people who started there working against racism by going and joining the armed services. But this would be another one to add to that. Emmett Till's dad, I forgot about. Talked about him as well. Lauren should be with us also.
Yes, sir. Am I able to be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I guess I'm going to speak about the segments that were played today. And the first one I wanted to talk about is when they were talking about the freeze in Texas that occurred in 2021. The lady, she said, you're always in fear. You don't know, so you over-prepare. But then, later on in the segment, when they were talking about what she did, they said she stocked up on tuna, bread, and extra bottled water. That does not seem like a lot. Now, maybe she did some other stuff and they just didn't talk about it in the segment, but if that was her only preparation, I don't think it was over preparation. And, not just in Texas, but everywhere, especially in this part of the world where people are used to having electricity, and I think these lapses in access to it are going to increase. I think we should think about what we're going to do if the power goes off, having an alternate way to stay warm. If you live somewhere where it gets super cold, think about your pipes freezing, what you're going to do about that. How are you going to cook food, boil water, take a bath, drink water, flush the toilet, all these things, and having food that doesn't have to be refrigerated necessarily. I don't think, just going to the grocery store one time is going to do it. And I understand it's really hard to get a standby generator. Well, it's expensive, so that makes it difficult. When they were talking about the greenhouse gases and the endangerment finding, Trump called it a scam, and then I think he said, either Trump said it or someone in the administration said that it was going to save the taxpayers $1.3 billion. I'm not sure over how much time, but I wondered to myself how much it would cost in healthcare costs. If there's no EPA, there is an EPA, but they have a different mission, it seems now, and there's no endangerment finding. How much will all these extra toxins and pollutants, how much is that going to cost people? It's going to be a lot more cancer, a lot more asthma, a lot more problems that I can't even think of right now. The Trump talking of the Truth Social post where he makes a video, posts a video with Michelle and Barack Obama being shown as apes. This might have been said last week, but Trump said he did not make a mistake and he refused to apologize. He also said it was a very strong post in terms about voter fraud. And he blamed it on some staff members and said the video wasn't watched all the way through. I don't think I accept that statement as true, but even while talking about this racist post, he kept talking about voter fraud in Georgia and that he didn't watch the whole thing. And he said that he's talking about, again, the voter fraud. Nobody talks about it. They don't like to talk about that. But he talks about voter fraud quite a bit, and lots of his supporters and administration, I don't know what you call them, members, they talk about it a lot. So I just don't think that's true. And also they said Kamala Harris she accused the White House of backpedaling. PGQ. She did not accuse them of practicing racism, not that she should, or, posting a racist video. Backpedaling. I don't know. That's an interesting way to put it. The lady who wrote that book, was it Forgotten Souls, where she was talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, and she said at least 3 times that these Tuskegee Airmen, the ones that were missing, that they were forgotten. And I was just wondering if that was the accurate statement. It's possible that white people just didn't care, not that they forgot about it. And when she was talking about the non-white people, she said they hadn't forgotten. I thought the way she said that was super interesting. And someone also said, it might have been her, that they were treated, I think she said they were either mistreated because of the era or treated poorly because of the era. And I don't know, what era is that exactly? Oh, the lady's name was Cheryl W. Thompson. The ICE, when they were talking about Democrats not supporting a blank check for chaos and Department of Homeland Security losing their funding, well, the thing is, you know, they got a lot of money with that bill that they called the Big Beautiful Bill, that omnibus. I mean, I thought it was either ICE or DHS in whole. Maybe it wasn't DHS, but they got like $75 billion in funding. So it seems like ICE and, you know, Customs Border Patrol, they'll still get paid, but TSA, you know, or people like that, they'll be affected, and their paychecks might be stopped, while ICE and CBP, they're just going to keep on doing what it is they're doing. And they said in the segment that it had been more than 36 accusations of excessive use of force. I think that's how they worded it. And it made me think, I read an article within the last week or two, and they listed the people that had been killed in like the last year by ICE or Customs and Border Patrol, and I only knew 2 of the names, the white people. That stood out to me. I thought it was important. And the lady in St. Louis, the 32-year-old, I think her name was Dametria McDile. She died in custody, and she had 6 children, and her family members were requesting money. You know, she said, help me bury her next to my mama. And I'm like, I don't want to use profanity, but if they don't have the money for a funeral, for a burial, then how are they going to be able to take care of those 6 children? That is such a terrible position for those people to be in. The Chicago elementary school where the little boy, he's in school and the teacher had them participate in a reenactment of slavery. The lady, she said, now my son is traumatized. He's asking questions because you gave him misinformation. Now, I'm not in support of slavery reenactments in the classroom, but I was just wondering what information the child got that was misinformation, because telling a child about slavery and racism, white supremacy, I don't think you should just call that misinformation. Those things happen. But I don't know. She didn't give specifics, so I'm really not sure. And she also said something else that confused me. She said something like people that look like blank, like people he's grown up with, or they look like something. But I got the impression that she was talking about white people when she said it, and I just didn't remember how she worded it. But yeah, I think they said the child was maybe age 9 or in 4th grade. I do think they should have been talking about racism before then. I will say that my mom did not talk to me about racism a lot when I was a little girl. She would say things about white people, but she never really explained to me. It was certainly not a definition for racism. And I didn't understand how dangerous white people were. And I don't understand racism now, but I had high level confusion. I read in the paper that Gallup is no longer going to track presidential approval ratings, and they have been doing that for almost 90 years. And Homeland Security, they want social media sites to expose anti-ICE accounts. That was in the New York Times, February the 13th. And also, earlier this week, airspace in El Paso closed. And it seems to be because, I don't know, the Department of Defense was firing some sort of anti-drone laser, and the FAA shut the airspace down. I don't know if this is something that's been going on for an extended period of time or if it's going to continue. But if that's something that's happening now, that is super dangerous. And if they're using these anti-drone lasers and, you know, shooting down other objects, a party balloon, or whatever they're shooting down, they're obviously not good at it. Maybe it's not too accurate, and it doesn't seem like they're coordinating with the FAA. That just seems like a really dangerous situation. That is all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
I looked back at the video because I was trying to get the transcript. There was very curious phrasing used. That incident where the racial slur happened at the basketball game at Great Bridge High School. It was very cute. Like those who, I'd have to even say it reminded me of the young lady that was with us in Canada where she said that the black boys were being kidnapped, and she said that they were being taken by those who don't look like us. What she said was not that in this sense. It reminded me of that. But it was something. Those who are. It was something curious. I'd have to even see the racial dynamics of this. Oh, and when I looked at her, this young male victim's mother is very pale. In fact, if you called me on it. Tiana Morton is her name, Tianamorton, Chesapeake, VA. I'd say she might have one white parent. I do think that's relevant. One, I think it's relevant because her son also looks kind of pale, and if that, he doesn't even have that much melanin, and he's still warranting that sort of response from his white fellow athletes on the court. Wow. And are we willing to, going to the circuitous language that was used, are we speaking honestly about this problem? Even going back to the other black mom in Chicago, where this incident was in Virginia, going to the mom in Chicago where they did the slave reenactment, where he had the same question I did. Hey, I don't know what he heard that he wasn't supposed to or what have you. I know this is a very young child. They said this is elementary school, so we could be talking about a 7-year-old. That's very young. That said, racists mistreat 7-year-olds. We're going to have honest dialogue with our offspring. That's why I said I'm so glad I'm not a parent. Not saying that as a criticism of this young mom, but just, yeah, I think maybe she didn't want to have that conversation, because I do hear that from a lot of black parents that they don't want to have that conversation. Maybe she didn't want to have it so early. Maybe she didn't want to have this sort of situation be the impetus for that conversation, but we are in a system of white supremacy racism. Let's see. Octavius in New York, did you have... Oh, wait a minute. Before we get to Octavius in New York, I did confirm Sade Hogue, black female that was in the Houston, Texas area, that was the one she said she prepared. She got extra tuna, bread. I was kind of thinking the same thing. I was thinking maybe a generator? Candles? Anywho, the report that I found in connecting all of that with the air quality and pollution that I had mentioned about the Houston area and the lack of regulation, that's why they have bad air quality and why they have these blackouts and energy failures, and with what Trump's doing with the EPA. This is from the Houston Chronicle, 2025, so just, and at the end of 2025, so this is just from a few weeks ago. air quality is worsening in this Houston neighborhood, raising cancer risk. Why isn't more being done? Less is being done. Rust orange shipping containers loom over Sade Hoag's yard in Setagast, overshadowing dozens of northeast Houston homes soaked in some of Texas's dirtiest air. The makeshift wall blocks her view of neighboring scrap processor Gold Star Metals, one of several industrial yards now encroaching on the residential area, but nothing stops the soot. When we come through my house and mop or sweep, everything is black. The floor is black. The ceiling fans, even the light is black. Hoag said she worries constantly about air pollutants that could be harming her young daughter's health. Setagast stands out like a flashing warning light in the state's network of air quality monitors maintained by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that measures tiny particles of pollution emitted from nearby industrial facilities, truck exhaust, and other sources. And it goes on to give more information. I'm just scrolling down to see if they are specific about this, because it's all black people in this, so it seems like there should be, oh yeah, and the Negras got to breathe all, they got lots of pictures in this article too. I don't see it, they just got dirty air. And is racism mentioned in this? No racism at all. Well, anyway, did they even mention that it's black people that live here? They don't mention that the black people, they do mention, oh yes they do. Sorry, here we go. Living with Setagast, and Setagast is Settegast. Living with Setagast's soot. Dying young is a concern for many residents living in the historically black neighborhoods that surround the air monitor on Wayside Drive. Setagast proper has the lowest life expectancy. Damn it, I said Devontae. Where's Devontae from? Harris County. What is it again? They got the lowest life expectancy. That's Setagast. That's why you got an energy problem in Houston. Not no black people in their green energy initiatives. That's why. White people practicing white supremacy, racism, and in fact, 5 years ago, they said in connection with the power outages in Houston, in the midst of the power outages, they said, we don't say blackout no more because of the racial connotations. Power outages. Octavius in New York. Thank you, sir.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings, callers and listeners. You made a great point right there, and I'm going to kind of springboard over to some of those things you're stating. Currently, right now, they're trying to put data centers in different areas around New York State and even in New York City in order, obviously, for AI, because the AI system needs so much processing power. It needs a lot of raw water. Unfortunately, when I say raw water, I mean drinking water. So it's also going to gobble up the water, and also, since more data centers will be placed, energy prices will spike up and start to go up in certain areas. So they're trying to push back on this as well here in New York State. One of the other things is they're also trying to make sure that some of these spaces are not near, quote unquote, black neighborhoods or non-white neighborhoods, which tend to be the case. But there are also initiatives that are being pushed to try to actually get equal sanitation for every neighborhood. Because it's very noticeable if you go into Manhattan on the west side, into these wealthy areas, the streets are clean. You go into certain neighborhoods that are non-white, it's the complete opposite. And obviously it shouldn't be that case if we're trying to live in some space that is just. The other thing I basically was just looking into, which you spoke about, was actually interesting, which was the children And the children at the daycare it draws a major concern. And as a parent, I could tell you I was really lucky in that aspect where the women at the daycare understood that my son we were in the middle of a custody dispute, so to speak, not to divulge too much, and that there would be times he may be somewhat unstable, and they would communicate this with me. A lot of non-white, basically all non-white women, a lot of black women, and I got so much support. It was just completely opposite from what I just heard as far as violence being done to children. That being said, there are aspects that I did have to deal with later on when he matured and became older, and he was foreseen as more of a physical threat. And I do remember the things that my mother said to me, and I didn't say it quite this way to him. I would have more in-depth discussions and ask him what transpired, who treated him what way, and then explain to him why. But my mother would say something to me that stuck with me till this day, which was, you have two strikes against you. You're black and you're a male, so you have to do better. And those were words that I heard from when I was young enough to comprehend them to when she passed away. So that's something that I think is extremely important. And I dial back to the show you did this past week with Dr. Paul Thomas, which I think is extremely important because he grew up in areas that were some areas that were non-white, as he stated. And in those areas, he was also mistreated. But because he didn't have any knowledge per se in regards to, or the words to describe how he was feeling or being treated, he couldn't quite comprehend it and understand it. And being in Norway, I couldn't even imagine. And I wanted to hear more stories about how he actually dealt with that. But I do believe he wrote his biography, which is, I think, great. The point that he made that I thought was interesting was that even after he became a professor, when he walked into a room and he was teaching, the white students would stand there and talk, have banter back and forth with each other, because they didn't think that he was actually the teacher. So even after he became a professional, an expert in his field, he still couldn't even get acknowledgement of that. And I really appreciated the fact he stated something, and I'm giving away some of the show here, but I think people should still listen to it. I appreciate the fact he stated, Norway, like many of the other European countries, view themselves as isolated and different from everybody else because they weren't as involved in the slave trade. But surely enough, they did have slaves, just like almost every other European country there. So that show was a real eye-opener, and I appreciated that one, just a tidbit of info there. A book that I tried to go and pick up, but I couldn't, unfortunately, was 5 Bullets by Elliot Williams, I should say. It was work on Bernard Goetz, the subway vigilante, so-called vigilante murderer, I should say, shooting 4 black teens in the subway. He said, basically, Elliot Williams interviewed him after this was done. This was done during the 80s when New York City was a little bit rougher in regards to the streets. And that after he interviewed Bernard Goetz is still racist. And this is a non-white male he's talking to. He's mixed, I believe, Elliot Williams, whatever mixed may be to people. And he stated that Bernard Goetz, when they were trying to capture him, they set up a hotline. And instead of people calling the hotline and giving hints on how to capture him because nobody knew who he was, people were calling in and overwhelmingly supporting him, bigging him up for his being brave enough to shoot these 4 teens. And then added on to then later on, Bernard Goetz was out of town and he was able to get away scot-free doing this. And it wasn't until he actually came back and turned himself in that he was even caught. So he would have gotten completely away with this attack on these 4 teens if it weren't for like him just deciding that, you know, I'll come in. But it was such a confusing and hectic time for New York City during the 80s when this transpired. But I think it's an important book. And I tried to go to a talk he had last week, but unfortunately my son was sick. I wanted to end off with this, which is going into my son, which is he's sick right now, has a stomach ache, but he's getting better. And he's working and he's going to school full time. And that's a lot of work and traveling back and forth, and it could be very stressful. And I asked him, because he does illustrations as well as write, I said, have you written in a while? And he said, no. I said, have you drawn anything? He said, a little bit, but not a lot. And I told him, I said, it's extremely important that you keep creating and keep using those skill sets, even though you may be stressed at this point in junction. Because the minute you stop, you kind of lose certain aspects of yourself and you lose those skills. The writing and the illustrations is a part of your identity. But it draws comparison to adults as we stop taking care of ourselves when we work and just keep working and doing other things for everybody else. But I automatically see the stress that he's going through, and I'm trying to guide him to do activities, go play soccer, go do things that would help him in dealing with some of the stresses that he's dealing with now. But that's all I have for now. With that, I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Black self-care. Love it. Love it. That right there is the type of thing that we talk about if we're going to be in a system of white supremacy, racism. Talking Dr. Welsing say, hey, if we are victim, and she was a general and child psychiatrist, she said, if we're victims of white supremacy, we do not qualify for mental health. So that also is something to talk with your children about very early and consistently, and just checking on them. And I mean, that is A+, giving out some tips and strategies to help them as best we can cope, manage, you know, find things that you love, find things that are as opposed to the mad dog, as opposed to the reefer. Can do some drawing, can do some writing, can do some readings, lots of things, because it's going to be lots of stress in the system of white supremacy racism, designed to be that. What did I say? They got the lowest life expectancy in Setagast, Houston, where the niggers stay. Like Devontae. You better hope you get stolen by a white woman and then you get starved and drugged and drowned. I thought he was going to say, my mother told me, you're black, male, privileged. That's not what she said. She said, oh, Lord, you have to be 2, 3, 4 times, man. They do call that John Henryism, but you have to be 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times as good, because you black, male. Dang, that's being truthful. That's what we need. Being truthful. Being truthful. The book that he mentioned, 5 Bullets, the story of Bernie Goetz, G-O-E-T-Z, New York's explosive 80s, and the subway vigilante trial that divided the nation, by Elliot Williams. 202. So that's 2 books. That's why I said, like, who are the folks who listen to the cows say, man, Gus, I don't know what to read. I can't imagine. Can you give me some books that we mentioned 2 books that were both published in 2026. Hot oil. And even I said Shar Adams, black owned, that was published in November 2025. That's hot off the presses too. We really, We're like in the vanguard of folks to have read that book. Facts. Reading more important than watching television. That's the type of thing, too. If you live in the tri-state area, books like this, oh, yeah, they're going to do a book talk on it. Go and take my child with New York history, study racism. We can support a black author because I think he said Elliot Williams is a black dude. But either way, we can go ask some questions. Best time ever. Best time ever. Everybody can do that sort of thing. Be paying attention. Books come out, especially if they're about racism in your region. Study, go ask questions, see if you can take your child, and that way they know, like, oh, wow, it's books about racism that come out. Like, wow, got to be on the lookout. Go to the bookstore, be reading, studying about racism. Like, man, I get depressed or discouraged or whatever the case may be, feeling lonely and down. Have one of those books that I grab, like, 5 Bullets. Forgotten Soul. This is a big list. Big. That's also kind of what I said too. Like, man, that is pitiful. I'm not saying that either of these books should be on anybody's top 10. Not at all. But just, man, I go retired firefighter or anybody come to me in 2000 and say, hey, Gus T, you got a reading list, some books you think I can read or pass down to my offspring, want to read, study about racism. No problem. I give out 10 books. They come back 25 years later. Hey, Gus T, I know you read a little bit at least. You got any more books? Oh, yeah. It's the same book. Real talk, even if half of the books are the same. Like, what the hell? Wait a minute. Ain't nothing been published in all that time? A quarter century? Ain't been no updates to racism? And worthy of great pit. Now, again, if this is, the books don't change on the book list for the niggers because we don't read, so we never read what was on the book list that we were supposed to read from 2000 or 1990. I guess we ain't going to get to 5 Bullets then. Reading is more important than watching television. Way more. Reading nonfiction. Make sure reading nonfiction. Way more important than watching television. That's it. We spin the globe, do our part as well for global system of racism. Stay tuned because we will have some of these. In fact, the time zone is so bonkers, we might even be able to just broadcast in our normal time slot and, because they're on the opposite side of the world. But I think we will, even with that, have some wacky broadcasts with folks from different parts of the globe, but same problem. Global system, white supremacy, racism. And new book for the book club. I'm so excited. If I hadn't picked, I'd maybe even think about this one. 5 Bullets. Looks so white vigilante. Wow, it's amazing. I'd already mentioned white vigilantes today 2 times, but already made my selection, and I'm super excited and looking forward. New book. I will, just in case I change my mind by some bizarre twist of fate or racists do something that I do not expect between now and, I'll say, Wednesday, but I'm pretty sure. New book already picked. I cannot wait. Reading is more important than watching television, and particularly after the listener, I think it was Mr. Douglas, he asked me yesterday, he said, since Shar Adams, since she omitted Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing, isn't that an F? When I talked to that chatbot about that omission in conjunction with her peppering us with all those authors who have one white parent and all that anti-sex in the conclusion, when I itemized that for the bot, and I even posed the same rhetorical question, if there was a black men's or a free black men's book club, would she have included it in the book? The bot said, ooh. Great rhetorical question. And the bot answered and said, based on what she wrote, I don't think so. This is really feminist-centered, and I think in fact, the bot said if she did include it, I think it would be as a problematic element of exclusion. It had a lot more to say about all that big pile of authors with one white parent who apparently have great things to say about racism, and then all that LGBTQI content at the end. Oh man. I did learn a lot, and that does happen. There are books where I learn a lot, but they are still an F because they have critical problems, and this would be one. Anywho, you should definitely go back and read though, because I did learn a lot. Dr. Wellesley, Mr. Fuller should have been there. Black owned, the bot even highlighted that by omitting Mr. Fuller, Dr. Wellesley, and then you emphasize all that anti-sex and all these not mixed race, non-white people who have a white parent. You are muting the very revolutionary Negro bookstore spirit that you claim to be highlighting as a theme of the book. I did learn a lot though. That said, reading more important than watching television. New book, Catherine Massey Book Club. Cannot wait. I will announce middle of the week. Check social media. I will update, let folks know about new programs, because I said we will have some irregular times. Hopefully worthy of folks' time and energy. Keep your children away from the television. I guess if you're going to prepare for bad weather and emergencies, have more than bread and tuna. Creator, we ask that you remind us sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. We already have poisoned water, poisoned air, poisoned food. We do not need no cigarettes, corn liquor, add to our gastrointestinal cancers. Get a brain computer so we can do some reading. Creator, remind us to stop saying not all white people are racist. Everybody ain't Bernie Getz. Remind us to stop name-calling black people for the slave auctions, reenactments, calling you Negro on the basketball team. Remind us, stop producing throwaway offspring for Mary Kay, for Devontae. If you are not speaking honestly to your children about the system of white supremacy racism, you are throwing your child away. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.